This is the California State Senate.
This is the California State Senate.
Esta es el Senado Estatal de California.
This is the California State Senate.
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 Este es el Senado Estatal de California.
This is the California State Senate. This is the California State Senate.
This is the California State Senate.
Esta es el Senado Estatal de California.
This is the California State Senate.
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 Este es el Senado Estatal de California.
This is the California State Senate.
This is the California State Senate.
This is the California State Senate.
Esta es el Senado Estatal de California.
This is the California State Senate.
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 Este es el Senado Estatal de California.
This is the California State Senate.
This is the California State Senate.
This is the California State Senate.
Esta es el Senado Estatal de California.
This is the California State Senate.
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 Este es el Senado Estatal de California.
This is the California State Senate.
This is the California State Senate.
This is the California State Senate.
Esta es el Senado Estatal de California.
This is the California State Senate.
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 Este es el Senado Estatal de California.
This is the California State Senate.
This is the California State Senate.
This is the California State Senate.
Esta es el Senado Estatal de California.
This is the California State Senate.
This is the California State.
All right. Well, good morning and welcome to everyone here. My name is Dr. Richard Pan, and we're chair of the California State Senate Select Committee on Asian Pacific Islander Affairs. And I'll welcome you to this hearing, which we'll call to order, hearing on the status of Asian American Studies in California Public Higher Education. And I appreciate everyone being here. I want to thank UC Davis for hosting this hearing here on the main campus. And so before we begin, I actually want to thank Provost Hexler and invite the Provost to give some welcoming remarks. Thank you, Provost Hexler. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Penn. It's good morning, everyone. Welcome, distinguished guests, to the UC Davis campus, and welcome everyone to this hearing. On behalf of the university, I want to say that we're honored to be your host today, and we are most happy to explore with you a topic that is of great importance to our state and its people, and also goes to the heart of what California public higher education is and hopes to be. I know everyone is eager to hear the expert testimony, so let me just briefly set the stage by elaborating a little on what I've just said. All of the California institutions represented at this hearing can be proud of their achievements in providing quality education to their students, and also to their achievements in the area of special interest for us today, Asian American Studies. I will not be so presumptuous as to attempt to characterize the landscape across all of our state's public institutions, but I can say a little about what we're doing here at UC Davis, with the understanding that to a large extent, our story is theirs as well. UC Davis is proud to be a leading research university, but equally proud to be a leading teaching university. Giving our students exceptional educational opportunities and experiences is one of our top priorities, and we have a strong record of accomplishment in this area, including service to California resident students. Indeed, UC Davis enrolls more California undergraduates than any other UC campus, as well as more transfer students from California community colleges. In addition, with our 4 colleges and 6 professional schools, we offer programs in more fields of study than any of our sibling UCs. A quality educational experience is typically anchored in the classroom, but we believe that it also extends to such invaluable activities as research experience, study abroad, community engaged and community service learning, and internships with local businesses and agencies. What's more, we have a variety of academic and other assistance programs designed to ensure that our students, once admitted, have what they need to persist, excel, and thrive at UC Davis and ultimately earn their degree. Another part of our commitment to educational excellence pertains to what we call diversity, in the broad sense of that word. Just as our university is working to make our student body more closely mirror California's diverse population, we're also working to more effectively provide our students with, to quote the name of our campus-wide initiative, a global education for all. This initiative, which is spearheaded by our Global Affairs Office, promotes the study abroad experiences that I've just mentioned, but also students' meaningful exploration of other societies, cultures, and languages while on our campus. Our program in Asian American Studies is integral to our efforts to internationalize the student experience. The importance of Asia in our 21st century global society, the large Asian American population in California, and the significant roles it has played in the state's history from its very beginning, and the contributions made in so many fields by Asians and Asian Americans require us to maintain a strong Asian American Studies program if we are to serve our students to the best of our ability. When I speak of serving our students in this way, I mean several different things. We want to prepare them for good careers, for being leaders and making positive impacts in American and global society, and for thriving in diverse workplaces, communities, and societies. In addition, we want all of our students to have the opportunity to learn about the history and impact of Asian Americans in California and beyond. For some, of course, it will be learning about their own heritage, but this is a field and area of study of value to all. In Asian American Studies and in all of our teaching programs, we believe that the quality of education we offer is greatly strengthened by multidisciplinary approaches, as well as our faculty's commitments to teaching and advanced research. One point of clarification. Asian American is a very broad term, and it fails to call out the great diversity of societal configurations, culture, history, and experience that defines and distinguishes different Asian American communities. Doing justice to this diversity in our teaching programs is one challenge we face as we move forward, but it is, of course, an opportunity as well. Achieving this goal will make the global education we provide all the richer. Excuse me. To conclude, I want to say again how very honored we are to host this legislative hearing. We greatly appreciate this opportunity to relate our institutional experience and to learn from the distinguished members of government and academia who are participating today. Welcome to UC Davis, and thank you very much.
Thank you so very much, Provost Hexter, for your remarks, and certainly very excited to be here today to discuss the status of Asian American Studies in California higher education. I am pleased to be joined by my good friend and colleague, Senator Josh Newman, who also serves on the Select Committee, and this is also a joint hearing with the Asian Pacific Islander Legislative Caucus, and our chair, Assemblymember Rob Bonta, will be joining us later on in this hearing. So one of the things that I want to touch on as we begin, I'm actually the first Asian American to be elected to represent the Sacramento region in the state legislature. We've certainly had other Asian Americans who were elected. For example, Congresswoman Doris Matsui and Ami Bera represent us in Congress, and we have several Asian Americans who serve also in local government as well. But when we look overall, in terms of our representation in government and politics, it's still below our size in the population. And in fact, one of the things that we've talked about in the API caucus is the importance of programs like Asian American Studies to help channel more people to be involved in policymaking and in the political arena. Now, I actually serve, in addition to chairing this select committee, I also serve on the Education Committee, as well as the Budget Subcommittee on Health and Human Services, and we've certainly advocated for supports and policies for our immigrant communities, the API community actually being the fastest growing immigrant community here in California. And I know that all of us have our own stories when we grew up where we faced challenges and discrimination and potentially bigotry, and also not having the opportunity when there isn't an ethnic studies program, an Asian American studies program, to learn more about our heritage, particularly in this country. There's certainly a rich history of API involvement in this country, and also some of the challenges that's presented for this country and the response. So even as right now we have a president who talks about a Muslim ban, it was the Chinese Americans who actually experienced the first actual exclusion based on ethnicity alone with the Chinese Exclusion Act. It was our Japanese Americans who were interned is probably too polite, incarcerated during World War II. And certainly we can talk about other incidents that happen, and that's something that we need to raise awareness of. And unfortunately, even just most recently, a fellow by the name of Mr. Bannon, who was invited to speak before the California Republican Party just this past weekend, had written an article saying there's too many Asians who are CEOs of technology companies. So we clearly have a lot of work to do to educate people, but also even ourselves. And I think that's one of the things that we want to talk about, even our own community, about the history of our community in the United States. Often people, we have we have a high proportion of immigrants, and people do bring some of that knowledge from where they come, from the countries from which they come. My parents were immigrants, they immigrated from Taiwan. But often when people come here and their children or they themselves may not actually know the history of Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders here in the United States. And that's why it's so important that we have Asian American Studies as an integral part of our higher education program, and even in our K through 12 program. Now, it's great that we're having this hearing right now in this building that houses the Cross-Cultural Center, which was actually initiated by 4 students who participated in a hunger strike for social and academic justice here in UC Davis in May of 1990. And in fact, this center that we're in right now demonstrates UC Davis's commitment to diversity and has developed programs and services in support of the cultural, social, personal, and academic needs of UC Davis's diverse student body. More specifically, UC Davis has a long history with Asian American Studies, and I'm proud to have been a faculty member here, so I got some idea about what happens here. And in fact, in 1969, there were thousands who attended a rally supporting ethnic studies, leading to the official establishment of Asian American Studies here at UC Davis, making one of the oldest departments in the state and the nation. So hopefully today, again, we will have a deeper discussion on the state of Asian American Studies as a whole and the possibilities into the future. I also want to give a special thanks to Robin Rodriguez. Are you here? Where are you? Oh, there you are. Hey, thank you. So there's a lot of people who have to work to make this come together. So this is like, all this work happened, and then we're here, and everyone's like, oh, look. So I want to really thank Robin for helping us put this together. So thank you so very much, as well as certainly UC Davis and UC Davis Asian Studies program department for allowing us to host this hearing on the campus. And I also want to thank the staff and the ASA department for assisting with this event. So with that, I would also like to give my good friend and colleague, Senator Newman, an opportunity to make some initial remarks.
Thank you very much, Senator Penn. So good morning, everybody, and thank you for being here, and thank you for having me. I grew up on the East Coast. I did not have the good fortune. If I had known how nice UC Davis was, I'd have bought myself a crappy bike and moved out here when I was 17. But thank you for having us, and thank you especially for this cookie buffet, which I have already started as we speak. But I'm glad to be here. I've had the privilege of working a bit with Kent Wong. I'm grateful. I share a couple of committees with Senator Penn. But more importantly, my district can boast one of the largest cohorts of Asian Americans. Fully about 30% of my district, the 29th Senate District, is API, and I am blessed to have 5 different educational institutions within my district. And so the conversation we are having today, as Senator Pan touched on, is important. It is important not just to examine sort of each group's experience in California, but then be able to relate that to the whole as part of effective advocacy and effective policy making. So I look forward to the conversation this morning. I know that Assemblymember Bonta will be joining us, and I think from there we're going to learn some things that we will take with us into the next legislative session. So thank you for having us.
Excellent. So we're going to go ahead and begin with our first panel. Now, I know after we all gave these long remarks, I do have to say that in order to be sure we get through everything, and also I want to be sure we have time for Q&A and dialogue, I've actually asked each speaker to keep the remarks down to 3 minutes, which I know is very short. But I'm hoping that that we can fill in some of the details as we have our back and forth after the initial remarks. So our first panel, we have Kent Wang, Director of the UCLA Labor Center, Russell Zhang, faculty at Asian American Studies at San Francisco State University, and I believe Kent Wu's on the way. No, I don't know if he's going to be able to get. All right. Well, we'll let the two of you take it away, and so if you can make some start off with some initial remarks, your 3 minutes, and then I do some back and forth here. All right. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you so much, Senator Pan and Senator Newman, for joining us in really a historic gathering. To my knowledge, this is the very first time that Asian American Studies faculty statewide have been able to present before a legislative committee like this. And we really hope that this is the beginning of a productive partnership that can help to advise our good friends in the state legislature with regard to critical policy initiatives that impact the Asian American community. I've actually been the director of the UCLA Labor Center for 25 years, but I've also been on the teaching faculty of the UCLA Asian American Studies Center for that entire time. We are coming up on our 50th anniversary of the founding of the UCLA Asian American Studies. It was established back in 1969. But let us be clear that the emergence of Asian American Studies as a discipline grew through struggle. It grew through student strikes, sit-ins, protests, and in the face of tremendous resistance on the part of the university and college administrations who felt that the emergence of ethnic studies threatened the traditional academy. And so like African American studies, like Chicano Latino studies, like Native American studies, Asian American studies as a discipline grew through struggle. My good friend and colleague, the late Professor Don Nakanishi, although he was one of the best regarded Asian American scholars in the nation, he had to go through a multi-year fight for tenure. And he was the very first Asian American ever tenured by the School of Education at UCLA, and it took legislative intervention in order for him to secure his tenured position at UCLA. You know, we have Congresswoman Judy Chu, who used to teach through the UCLA Asian American Studies, who has gone on to become such a powerful advocate, not only for the Asian American community, but for broader issues of social and economic justice. And Warren Fratani, a former member of the state legislature, used to direct the student community projects at the UCLA Asian American Studies Center. So this is a reflection of the types of leaders who have emerged through our field. I think that, you know, Senator Pan's introductory comments were right on target. We need to educate not only the Asian American community, but the community at large about the horrendous track record of the U.S. government with regard to their treatment of Asian America. And so the 1882 Chinese Exclusion Act barred wide-scale immigration from Asia for over 70 years, and it was only reversed through the civil rights movement of the 1960s. We need to educate our president, who is threatening a Muslim ban once again, which harkens back to the 1882 Chinese Exclusion Act, and also very much questions the legitimacy of the internment of Japanese Americans during World War II. So these are critical issues that we have been bringing to the university. We do have a statement that goes into more detail about our recommendations from the UCLA Asian American Studies faculty, which are included in your packet, but I will close my remarks there and hope that we can continue this conversation well into the future to provide a proactive role in helping to engage with friends in the California State Legislature. Thank you.
Thank you. Russell.
Good morning, Senator Pan and Senator Newman. We'd like to thank you for hosting this hearing today. I'd also like to thank Provost Hexler for hosting and for all the UC Davis faculty and especially the Asian American Studies. I actually want to especially acknowledge all the students here. And we hope this isn't only an extra credit event, but that it'll be a learning opportunity for you guys to get extra credit. But we actually expect you guys to be up here at these tables, not only as faculty, but as policymakers and officials too in the future. This morning, I'm going to talk a little bit about the scholarship being done at the CSU level and some of the work we're doing particularly at San Francisco State. As Professor Wang noted, ethnic studies and Asian American studies came out of a legacy of community-based struggle and research on the conditions of our communities, and we continue to do that at San Francisco State. We actually have 16 tenure-track faculty currently, and we teach over 2,000 students each semester. I'm proud to say in the last 5 years, 2 of the award winners of the Community Engaged Scholar of the Asian American Studies Association, the National Association of Asian American Studies, 2 of the winners have come from San Francisco State. So it just speaks to the role of our community-based scholarship. So this is just the kind of work that I do personally. I've worked and have done needs assessments on all these particular groups. The most marginalized, I think, within the Asian American community: displaced garment workers, SRO residents who are actually legally homeless because they have such small living conditions. More recently, I've done work with refugees from Burma and Bhutan, Mongolian Americans who are largely undocumented, and even a study on Himalayan women. And so being at the CSU affords me the opportunity to work with these groups and not just study them, but to study with them on how to improve their conditions. Just quickly, one quick study, or one review of a study that we did was with refugees from Burma, and we found that 60% were living under extreme poverty. And even though they all had health care, Dr. Pan, healthcare was still their top issue because they said they couldn't speak to their doctors, right? And so the results of the study, now these studies were actually conducted with students. Each time I did a study, I brought students to host health fairs and to survey respondents. And after a 4-year series of surveys, we published a report on the needs of refugees, and that led to a state audit that actually increased funding for refugee services. We've actually not garnered funding for ourselves in ethnic studies, but Asian Health Services, a local nonprofit, has actually used our report to gain over $600,000 in grants. And so I'm proud to say for Asian Health Services, now refugees make up 8% of their patient load and patient visits. So that just speaks to how our work reaches the communities and provides both agencies and local communities greater needs. So to conclude, not only do we study our communities, but students from these communities are now attending our classes. And again, these are the most marginalized students in the state. 1 out of 3 have to decide between whether they're going to pay for a textbook or pay for the cost of tuition. And despite these barriers and despite these issues, I just really want to point out, those who take ethnic studies and those who major in Asian American studies have a much higher graduation rate than the average. So we actually have a 90% graduation rate as compared to about 50% over a 6-year span. So Asian American studies is making a huge impact, not only in our communities, but in our classrooms. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much for your presentations. I want to now pose a few questions. So one of the things we're looking at the overview of the current status of Asian American Studies. I note that in our background paper that basically about 1/3 of our CSU campuses actually has a program or a department, about only 5 out of 10, so that's half of the UCs. Can can you speak to, at least in your own home institute, I don't know if you have the statistics on across the system, each of the systems. For example, how many faculty and what percentage of, let's say, the undergraduates actually even take one course in the department, so I get a sense of the what the reach is, but also recognizing your capacity as well. So maybe perhaps each of you can speak to that issue, both for your own individual department. If you can also make some comments about your system overall as well, UC and CSU.
Surely. So I'm really glad you raised that issue because in our view, the field of Asian American Studies is under-resourced and under-supported within both the University of California system, as well as the California State University system, as well as within the community college system. And it is our view that the Asian American Studies as a discipline greatly enriches the educational and research opportunities for students throughout the higher education system. We have been very supportive of a program within certain California State University campuses that have made ethnic studies a requirement, and that has tremendously diversified the student population that has been enrolled in Asian American Studies and ethnic studies classes. And we think that's a very significant contribution to our future members and leaders within our society, to have a deeper appreciation and respect and understanding of the diverse cultures that make up the state of California. And so we absolutely support not only the defense, but the expansion of those provisions which provide for more institutional support for Asian American Studies and ethnic studies.
Exactly. One of the dangers that we're facing now is there's high pressure to graduate students on time and within 6 years. And so there's been executive orders to actually reduce the number of requirements students have to take. And so at San Francisco State, we make sure that every Asian American Studies class meets some GE requirement. But for other CSU campuses, they don't meet requirements, and so they have lower enrollment. And so what we need is to have ethnic studies as a requirement for all students, similar to what Professor Wong said, is because it doesn't only benefit Asian American students, but every California student needs to, if they want to be a 21st century employee, they have to understand the diversity and the needs of our communities.
No, I appreciate that. And unfortunately, I don't think we have a member of the panel who's on the community college side. I appreciate you made a reference to that. So I want to be sure we don't neglect also thinking about the tremendous number of students who actually come through our community college system as well. Let me ask another. So I hear both of you say, well, we should make ethnic studies a requirement for students to take a course in ethnic studies. If that was done, are you going to be I used to be a faculty member, so can you handle all those students? If suddenly now you have a bunch of students saying we're going to sign up, what's the state of the faculty? What's their capacity to be able to teach that many courses and still be able to, get promoted and get to careers? You talked about, one figure who actually had to fight to get their tenure. I realize that's not about teaching capacity, but sometimes, how do we help support the faculty? If we're going to push a policy now that says everyone has to take ethnic studies, then what does that do to the faculty? Not saying that that's good for the students, perhaps, but how is that going to impact the faculty, and what do you see as the state of the faculty right now?
So the reality is that we are very proud of our field, and I think we have excellent faculty at all three levels of higher education within the state of California: the community colleges, the CSUs, and the UCs. And in addition, we have an extraordinary network of graduate students. Any tenure track position that opens up on one of the UC campuses has literally hundreds of applications. We have top scholars that are willing and able to teach in this field. And I think that as Dr. Jurong pointed out, the field benefits everybody, not just Asian American students. And I think that to encourage more students to have a deeper appreciation and understanding through enrolling in ethnic studies would strengthen our society as a whole.
Yeah, on our campus, 80% of our lecturers are actually MA graduates from our program. So we're creating the pipeline. And I think our graduate students who are here actually as faculty now attest to that, how we're preparing students. And so the pipeline is there. There's 3 MA programs in Asian American Studies in our state. And so I think it's not enough supply of faculty. It's actually the resources available to hire the faculty and to retain them. And the other issue, I think, is not only should Asian American Studies faculty be teaching Asian American Studies, but all faculty need to develop ethnic studies curriculum in their own curriculum. So a history teacher should teach Asian American Studies in their class. So, or even like an environmental scientist could do environmental justice classes on Asian American communities. So you'll hear further testimony, I'm sure, about the need to increase the pipeline and to increase the resources available to our departments so that we could serve our students better.
Quick question for Professor Chung. You referenced 2 different graduation statistics, one for freshmen majors in Asian American Studies, one for transfers. And I think it was 97% graduation for freshmen and 84% for transfers. What accounts for that differential, for the, which is, I mean, 97% is super impressive, 84% I'm sure is high relatively, but why would there be a material difference between transfers and incoming freshmen?
Yeah, that's a good question. Transfer students come from the community colleges, and so generally they tend to be more working class, they're usually working, and they're usually re-entry students, and so they're older. So the time they take to completion is a lot longer than freshmen who usually have the resources available to them to start a CSU or a UC straight off. If you have to go to community college, you face more barriers and you have more hardships to overcome.
If I could just add to that as well. Unfortunately, since the gutting of affirmative action within the state of California, we have seen a precipitous drop in the number of African American and Latino students, especially on campuses such as UCLA and UC Berkeley. And that has been accommodated in large part because of community college transfer students who enter in to the 3rd year. Ethnic studies as a field has really served as a critical point of support and in enhancing retention of large numbers of students of color who otherwise have felt very alienated within these environments. And so I do think that that's another bonus, that ethnic studies not only has been very helpful in retaining and supporting students of color within higher education, but they've also provided pathways and career opportunities that would not otherwise be available through the courses in ethnic studies.
So I just wanted to follow up on one of the points that was made about certainly ethnic studies should not just be taught by ethnic studies professors. This should be incorporated into other courses and other curricula. Can you comment on the current state and where you see things should go in terms of collaboration with people in other departments in terms of trying to get that information into the broader curriculum? I guess, well, it's not really probably a great example, but I went into sciences. I'm a physician, so I didn't take a lot of humanities classes, but I know one of the things that I always noted as I went through my career, and I have a master's in public health as well, is every time I read a research study, and they look at the ethnic distribution, they go, white, black, Latino, other, right? And I said, well, we're more an other, and so that's something that sometimes it just gets passed over when we talk about health studies. When I got my master's in public health, and sometimes I throw a little fit about it and say, well, it's, you can say that we don't have enough numbers and that's why we didn't do the analysis, but just simply to say other probably didn't work. But perhaps you can comment about opportunities or things that are being done now to collaborate or to try to get the ethnic studies into other courses and other schools even, outside of the arts and sciences.
Well, Senator Pan, you have highlighted a critical issue that has been a source of tremendous contention. And people in our field have been strenuously advocating for inclusion of data that disaggregate the Asian American community. And many national studies to this day refuse to count Asian Americans. And so we exist in many instances, especially by policymakers in Washington, D.C., as an invisible community. And so until we make the demand that Asian Americans are included in national research studies, we will continue to be overlooked on a whole host of issues, including public health, including access to services, including political power and political representation. So our field has been advocating strenuously for the inclusion of Asian Americans in these national surveys.
Yeah, for me it's a both and. We both need Asian American studies to be more developed so that we could actually do the depth of research that we need to create books and texts and scholarly works about the depth that we then share with other departments. So they're not going to do let's say English wouldn't do a whole class on maybe Asian American writers, but they can use our work and our research to introduce those texts to their students as well. And so it's both us developing the field of Asian American studies and needing support for that, and then disseminating our work to other departments. So it's a both and. And I think UC Berkeley has a diversity requirement where both, a lot of the non-ethnic studies classes have to include different racial groups in their curriculum. So that's just one example of how you could do both, having a depth of research and scholarship, and then also a breadth across curriculum to include ethnic studies.
Okay. Well, I have to admit, I have lots of other questions, but I also want to keep in time. I want to thank you so very much for being here and presenting, and really appreciate the dialogue. And I know that we're going to have some more great dialogue with some of our other panels, but thank you so much for your leadership.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, you have. Thank you. All right,
before I conclude, I just wanted to make a short pitch for our Daca Youth. There are 800,000 undocumented immigrant youth who have qualified for DACA whose lives are hanging by a thread. And of the undocumented students, we have the largest concentration here in California in the community college, in the Cal State, and in the UC system. And so this is a critical issue. I've given you copies of our publication that was written by and about undocumented students called Dreams Deported, Immigrant Youth and Families Resist Deportation. And this is a source of tremendous concern about many within our field, within Asian American studies and ethnic studies. And we hope that leaders of the California State Legislature who have been so courageous in defending immigrant rights will continue to do so.
Oh, thank you. And we will. Thank you. Okay, so our next panel is where Asian American studies, ethnic studies could go. And so we have Rowena Tamaneg, did I pronounce that correctly? Sorry. All right. Who's president of Berkeley City College. Gina Mesco-Quizme, faculty at Asian American Studies at CSU Northridge. I think we're having someone by Skype. We're having Harvey Dong. I'm not sure how we're doing that. Who's faculty at Asian American Studies at UC Berkeley as well. And is going to join us remotely. And then also Michael Castaneda. Did I pronounce it correctly? Okay. All right. Huh?
Castaneda.
Oh, Castaneda. All right. He's an alumnus of the Asian American Studies program at UC Berkeley. And actually, just before we begin, how are we doing the Skype thing? Okay, over here when we get to his part. Okay. All right. So again, I'm going to ask each of you if you can try to keep your comments down to 3 minutes. But hopefully, you can see from the last panel, I'm hoping we more opportunities to get to talk about things as we get some Q&A and dialogue. So thank you and welcome. So you want to start, Ms. Tomanegi?
Great. Is this on? Okay, so good morning and thank you again to UC Davis for hosting this wonderful convening, and thank you to Dr. Pan and Senator Newman for participating in the conversation. So again, my name is Rowena Tamaneng. I'm currently the president of Berkeley City College, which is part of the Peralta Community College District. And at my district, we have 2 institutions, including my own, that are both designated as ANAPISI and also HSI. My sister college, Laney, is also ANAPISI institution. But here for today, I'm actually representing the experiences administering a program which was ANAPISI funded at De Anza College, which was my previous institution, called Impact AAPI. And in that program, our curricular pathways incorporated Asian American studies, which significantly improved the educational outcomes of our students. A little bit about community colleges. So community colleges, we are a system that includes 2.1 million students. We have 114 campuses across our system. 3 out of 10 Californians ages 18 to 24 are currently enrolled in a community college. Over 67% of California community college students are people of diverse ethnic backgrounds, and roughly 53% are female. Almost 15%, or over 300,000 of California community college students identify as Asian American, Native Hawaiian, or Pacific Islander. Out of the 114 community colleges, currently we have 29 community colleges designated as ANAPISI institutions. Also, 29% of University of California and 51% of California State University graduates started at a community college. Because Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders are usually categorized under the big umbrella of API, this hides the historical and socioeconomic differences and challenges each of the 48 ethnicities under this category. Some groups, such as Southeast Asians and Chamorro, for example, face significant barriers that limit their educational opportunity. College leaders and policymakers rely on data to base their decisions on where to allocate resources to improve educational outcomes. Data disaggregation provides educational institutions more information on student admissions, enrollment, completion, and graduation rates. De Anza College's ANAPISI-funded Impact AAPI, for example, was developed from the data disaggregation we had done on ANAPI students. So this program, incorporating Asian American Studies courses in addition to counselors and peer mentors, significantly increased persistence of Filipino students, Southeast Asian students by a margin of 20% in some instances, especially in basic skills completion to transfer level. So with that, I would like to encourage our legislators to support data disaggregation, mandate data disaggregation for community colleges across the system, also to help support increasing ANAPISI funding so we can continue to develop curricular pathways with Asian American Studies to not only close the achievement gap, but also to empower our communities. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, the organizers, and to the senators for being here. My name is Gina Masakesme, and I'm a chair and professor at in Asian American Studies at Cal State Northridge. Since the founding of ethnic studies at San Francisco State, many progress has been made on other campuses, including mine. In recent years, we've seen setbacks. A recent revision of Executive Order 1100 has threatened ethnic studies, gender women's studies, and queer studies at Cal State Northridge. The background of this is that CSUN has a general education Section F requirement, and that it values interdisciplinary approach and houses most of the ethnic studies, gender women's studies, and queer studies courses. It's considered a robust way to build an ethnic studies program and smaller departments that are GE dependent. Other ethnic studies program, when we talk to them, say that we are the model that they should follow. So what happened is that, and also if you look at Chancellor's White CSU task force, they also recommended a system-wide ethnic studies requirement. Unfortunately, 2 months ago, the Chancellor's Office issued revised Executive Order 1100. Its intentions are to make GE requirement portable across campuses and to help improve graduation, especially amongst transfer students by clarifying requirements, ensuring equitable opportunity for student success, and streamlining graduation requirements. I'm sorry. Could someone do this for me? We are on slide 4. But from what we can see, what it does is the opposite. So now slide 5. Specifically, it limits GE to Section A through E with a cap of 48 units. This means no Section F. There exists about 138 courses, some with multiple sections. Obviously, this is without faculty consultation. Our admin solution is to redistribute Section F courses into traditional disciplines and without considering other negative effects of this executive order. We believe eliminating Section F is a backward step against progress because ethnic studies courses have improved students' retention and graduation by giving them a sense of belonging, connection, what my colleagues have said. The current proposed solutions by our administrators will decrease our enrollment and competitiveness. Lower enrollment means a smaller budget the following year. Set up as a policy to improve graduation, revised Executive Order 1100 does the opposite. It demands students to graduate in 4 years without considering their socioeconomic reality. It also blocks the efforts of ethnic studies, gender, women's studies, and queer studies courses to empower historically marginalized students. Irrationally, it demands that in addition to 2 lower division GE science course, students need to take 3 units of upper division GE requirement. This will lead to bottleneck, long wait lists, etc. In conclusion, revised Executive Order 1100 is ill-conceived and will not increase graduation rate, but decrease it. There's no data to support that students are harmed by Section F requirement. We've been asking, they cannot give us that. So we really want you guys to support us and to rescind Executive Order 1100. We have been talking to our administrators and they just want to comply. And it's a terrible decision. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I think actually we're having Mr. Dong next, and then I think you get that cleanup. So that's okay.
Hello, this is Harvey Dong.
Welcome.
I have. I'm a lecturer in the Asian American Asian Diaspora Studies program at UC Berkeley, and I have a statement submitted by our program. First, we would like to thank our colleagues at UC Davis, the Senate Select Committee on API Affairs, and the API Legislative Caucus for this convening and for the opportunity to share our thoughts about the state and condition of Asian American studies in higher ed. With our 50th anniversary just 2 years away, this is an important moment for us to reflect on what we have accomplished thus far, where we hope to be in the years to come. Since its formation, Asian American Asian Diaspora Studies has produced and disseminated knowledge about the histories, cultures, and communities of diverse Asian American populations. We have developed pioneering programs in Southeast Asian American and more recently Muslim American studies, both of which are important intellectual spaces not found on many campuses or in any other departments on the Berkeley campus for that matter, despite the obvious historical and contemporary significance of the subject matters. Without abandoning our commitment to social justice concerns in the U.S. and to more accurately capture the complex lived realities of our families and communities, we have expanded our intellectual mission to include diaspora studies. Despite a shrinking faculty, we continue to advance important national and global concerns pertinent to Asian Americans and seed a new generation of engaged citizens through our research, teaching, mentorship, and community engagement. Our undergraduate degree program has prepared numerous students to be civic and political leaders, scholars, teachers, and socially aware citizens across the nation. We're proud of what Asian American and Asian Diaspora Studies has accomplished, but much remains to be done. Asian Americans continue to be an important presence at Berkeley and in California. Our communities have grown not only numerically, but also in complexity. For the large and highly diverse Asian American student community on campus, Asian American Asian Diaspora Studies remains one of the few places, and for many, the only place on campus that are intellectually enriching and personally nurturing. All this points to the need for even greater institutional investment in the growth and vitality of Asian American studies at Berkeley and elsewhere. However, despite their prominence on Berkeley campus, Asian Americans are largely invisible politically, with notable absence of representation at the cabinet level of the university administration. In this climate of fiscal austerity, in which academic imperatives are undermined by resource constraints, we are increasingly challenged in our ability to deliver on our intellectual commitment to foregrounding histories and experiences that have been marginalized, buried, silenced, or erased. The emphasis on enrollment numbers has shifted curricular priority onto courses that draw a wide audience so as to ensure high enrollment at the expense of those that allow students to delve deeply into certain histories and experiences and are intellectually and personally enriching that they will not find elsewhere. For many Berkeley students, our Southeast Asian American courses, for instance, are likely to be the only meaningful engagement with these histories and communities in their entire K to 16 education and perhaps even beyond. Increased class size and shrinking instructional support also have adverse effects on pedagogy at a time when our undergraduates need more, not less, exposure to research, analytical writing, and critical thinking.
Okay. Professor Dong? Yeah. You're low over time, so I just want to give you. We can't give you visual signals, so that's why I just want.
Oh.
All right.
Oh, okay.
And hopefully you can. I assume you're going to be joining us for the Q&A too. So.
Yeah. Okay. So. So basically, I feel that we're actually suffering from neglect in our programs, and our programs are severely underfunded. A third world strike in 1969 led to the creation of an interim Department of Ethnic Studies, of which Asian American Studies was a program. This was supposed to have been a temporary solution, pending further negotiations for a full College of Ethnic Studies. We do have a model that personally I would like to look towards, and that would be a College of Ethnic Studies, which does exist at SF State University. Okay.
All right.
Okay, so I'll stay for the Q&A.
Okay, no, excellent. Thank you so very much for joining us. And again, we're going to have I hope you've been following the panel discussion. And then, so we have Mr. Castaneda. No, thank you so much.
All right. My fellow speakers have outlined many of the positive impacts of Asian American studies. In the time that I have to speak, I want to address a systemic issue in higher education that limits the impact that Asian American studies can have on the lives of its students. Higher education's increasingly reliance on contingent faculty. So for the past year, I've worked as a part-time, non-tenure track faculty member. Over this period, I split my time teaching in the College of Ethnic Studies at San Francisco State University and the Department of Ethnic Studies at UC Berkeley. In total, I taught 6 semester-length courses during the 2016 and 2017 academic year, and I made less than $25,000 that year. My personal experiences are reflective of a larger reality. Institutions of higher education are increasingly dependent on a heterogeneous class of instructors, part-time lecturers, teaching one or more courses, full-time lecturers, graduate student instructors, pre-doctoral instructors, postdoctoral instructors, and visiting assistant professors. These employment classifications are distinct, but they're interconnected. For one, due to economic need, one instructor can move between varied positions from year to year, or even term to term. Let's see. 2, as the graph on the screen shows, nationally, these varied institutional positions, when taken together, constitute a new faculty majority. According to the data acquired by the National Center for Educational Services, 73% of faculty appointments nationally, as late as 2014, were some variation of non-tenure track employment. Third, while pay scales, responsibilities, and employment security may vary across these different categories, they all share common traits: temporary terms of employment that have much higher workloads and much lower wages than their tenure track peers. These national trends are clearly represented in the universities in California. As a as of a 2016 study prepared by the California Faculty Association shows, we see a majority of the faculty, almost 57% within the CSU system, are lecturers who gross less than $38,000 a year. So a key question to ask is, how do these conditions that contingent faculty labor under, low wages, high workloads, and limited employment stability, impact Asian American Studies departments and their ability to have a meaningful impact on their students' lives? 3 points stand out to me. The first is mentorship. Ethnic studies instructors play a critical role in the lives of their students as mentors. However, when contingent faculty are overworked, consistently looking for employment opportunities to supplement their meager wages, and often have to find employment across multiple institutions, like myself, the ability to genuinely support students on a one-to-one basis is significantly hindered. 2, quality education. Inconsistent employment of contingent faculty are also impacts classroom instruction. In many cases, contingent faculty discover what classes they teach only a couple weeks before the term starts. This leaves little time for preparation or course innovation. And lastly, community engagement. Another key component of Asian American Studies courses is their relationship to community-based organizations. These partnerships take time to develop and are most meaningful when they're sustained over time. Thus, when contingent faculty are unclear what courses they're going to teach, how long they might be affiliated with an institution, there are clear structural impediments to the impacts Asian American Studies can make across the classroom. I think I already reached my time, but maybe I'll leave policy recommendations for question and answer.
Okay, well, thank you. Well, thank you. Do you have any questions?
So the evacuation would mean reporting and looking for advice.
Oh, okay. All right, okay.
We are auditing his class. That's
there we go. We are auditing his class. All right. There you go. So I guess one of the questions, and I had, and I appreciate the issue that was presented regarding to was it Executive Order 1100. But you also made reference to the fact that with by excluding that from general education, you have fewer students. Fewer student means less funding. So, and we have a president of a college here too, you know. So I guess let me ask the question about funding. Where is the funding coming from to support not just the teaching activities, but the faculty overall? You know, we talk about contingent faculty and the low pay and so forth. What kind of funding streams are there that's supporting Asian American Studies? I mean, are we all completely dependent on the institution provide funding, which, you know, through the state to the institution, or what about external funding? Again, you know, there's also the question of research or you know, that kind of work as well. This additional scholarly work beyond education. How's that support? So perhaps you may want to comment on where the funding comes to support your departments and our institutions in relation to Asian American studies.
I think that every institution is different. At Northridge, we depend on enrollment. FTES is what we count. So the more we have of students, the more we'll get. Our budget is based on this year for next year. So we have a lot of GE classes, and that has been helpful. And we teach about 4 classes per semester. So that's a lot for faculty to then also look for outside research. Some do, but it's not enough to do much funding. So the FTS is what we get for budget. And then from that, we hire faculty. Whatever we have left, that's extra money that we can use for programming. It's not a whole lot. They don't even give us enough operational expenses, so we usually buy supplies with that.
So trying to keep this short because there's a lot of detail. So for community colleges, I mean, in terms of public education, community college students on the average, we receive about $5,400 from the state through apportionment because we too are governed by enrollment numbers. So when enrollment drops, you know, then we don't have as much apportionment from the state. So compared to our CSU and UC counterparts, It's less than CSU, I believe now it's about 13,000, a little bit more per student for apportionment, and for UC, we're getting close to 15,000, maybe 16,000 for apportionment. So we do have to supplement our operations and also the different initiatives that we are seeking. You know, we look at research all the time so that we can implement high impact practices to improve our educational outcomes. So right now for community colleges, fortunately, the state has invested in student equity work. So we have supplemental funding through student equity dollars. We have supplemental funding through strong workforce dollars to improve the number of community college students that are completing their certificate or degree for career and starting their profession. In addition to that, we are also looking at federal funding. Community colleges like CSUs and UCs, we apply to the Department of Ed. And so this is when, for many of us who are both Hispanic serving institutions and Anapeasy serving institutions, the increase in funding for Anapeasy's becomes critical. So, for example, when I was at De Anza College, we had 2 rounds of Anapeasy funding, and that allowed us to improve the to close the racial achievement gap with Filipino students, Cambodians, and also Pacific Islanders. Now that the funding, since I left the institution and the funding has gone away, we have institutionalized through the curriculum with Asian American Studies some of that work, but we still need funding to maintain the levels of staffing that are needed.
In terms.
Oh, did you want to comment on the question?
No, I think I.
Oh, okay. And actually, I don't know if Professor Dong, since he's at UC.
A civilian organization.
Okay, maybe not. All right. Okay. Senator Newman.
So I think we touched on something very important here. So Ken Wong referenced the benefits of cross-pollination, as it were. But we also have this emphasis on graduation rates. And so a data point per se doesn't really say much about your priorities. And I think in the case of the emphasis on graduation rates, we are creating a tension between funding at different levels. One, to get the outcome with respect to fastest path to graduation, but that if that's at the expense of 2 things, a well-rounded curriculum that creates well-rounded people that will be fully participating citizens, that's one thing. I also worry, to Mr. Castaneda's point, that pressure has created a sort of an indentured serving category of professors who are poorly paid, who don't have access to tenure tracks, but who nonetheless are doing a good deal of the work within the system. So this is obviously a very long, much larger conversation, but how do we get at that tension in a smart way that actually achieves the goal of ensuring, proper funding for API studies, but takes into account how big the system is and the kind of the pressures that are being brought to bear on all of your work and the teachers who do the work?
Well, maybe just to speak to that point, I think a clear kind of policy decision I think that I want to advocate is that the contingent faculty that already exists in these departments are ideal candidates for expanding the tenure track position, because these are, I think, the way that we often speak about contingent faculty as if they're less than faculty, right? But in terms of, we have to also understand that these are folks with, research agendas. These are folks who are creating, I think they're doing cutting edge work in the fact that in a lot of cases, we might find out what courses we're going to teach a couple weeks, maybe a couple days. And actually, I was even proposed to develop a course even after the semester got started. So in terms of, if you think of the type of educator that is a contingent faculty person, they are innovative educators with, so just think of if they're in a position to be tenure track lines. And I think the real question is having the resources to expand the number of tenure track faculty teaching in these programs so programs can grow and programs can be innovative. So I think it isn't necessarily an issue of, I'm, like my pay scale suggests that I'm, in indentured servitude kind of status. But at the same time, there's the issue of that's a structural position that could be alleviated with funding, right?
And I in no way meant to imply that was the way it should be.
Yeah.
I guess my quick follow-up for President Tomanek, you referenced some of the student equity funds. I mean, very simply, are there enough to make a difference? Because I feel in a lot of cases like we're simply moving kind of the chairs around the deck, as it were, and not really in a position to make those important prioritization changes.
So I think the challenge for the student equity funds, in addition to the student success program funding, is that for student equity, it's not as stable as a categorical as opposed to the student success program. So for example, the student success program dollars have allowed across the system the hiring of a diverse pool of counselors to improve the matriculation process and provide that educational advising for our students along the way. But student equity isn't at the same level to allow you to hire faculty. And then if you do hire faculty, it's not sustainable. And so then you're faced with potential layoffs, if the budget changes at the state level. So I think that is one of the challenges that we experience. We want to be able to use the monies, given to us effectively and efficiently, but the sustainability always becomes an issue.
I would like to add that most of the money that comes in doesn't go to hiring faculty. It goes to hiring administrators. That's where the bumps in salaries are. So I just have an instructional budget to hire faculty, and I have to exploit part-timers by hiring people who I don't have to pay that much so that I can have some money for programming.
No, I appreciate what the challenges you're presenting, and maybe I did author a bill which unfortunately did not make it past appropriations to actually try to limit the at least slow down the move toward part-time faculty. Basically said we need to move the other direction, which frankly multiple studies have said. So I want to touch one of the consequences of this, and I appreciate you commenting on this. Our previous panel talked about how we need to expand the reach. We talked about requiring ethnic studies potentially, and again, maybe you might want to comment on your feelings about capacity, being able to handle if you actually had more study students. Maybe you get more funding that comes with that if that happens. But and then I guess the other issue is that of course API is a very diverse group, right? So oftentimes, that's the model minority myth, and they're looking at a subclass, and so what happens is we know that many of our people are API. There's many groups that are tremendously disadvantaged and get masked in the larger group, and so the other issue related to that, though, is that especially if we have more contingent or part-time faculty, I understand that you're at least as a full-time faculty member, you have a little more time potentially to do things like mentoring. Right, and counseling. You're not basically the part-timers are basically you're told that we're paying you based on your classroom time, but there's a lot of out of classroom time, right? That and in fact, when we talk about cross collaboration or trying to get ethnic studies more out there, part of it's of course classroom and what you teach and who's showing up there, but also being available to mentor people who may not even be in the major, but now seeks you out as a faculty member and identifies and so forth, and. So can you perhaps speak to comment or speak to that aspect of things? Is how do you try to handle that particular part, as well as of course programmatic part? I mean, again, it's not just education scholarship as well.
And I think in terms of obviously it's a difficult kind of issue of kind of managing all of that work, but at the same time, even though I'm not hired to do kind of the service work of, say, kind of mentorship or counseling. If a student comes into my office hours and asks those questions, I'm not going to not talk to them, right? So I think, I just reiterate my point that if you look at, the level of kind of teaching, the new kind of courses that contingent faculty always have to deal. I really think it's not an issue of capacity to do that work. It's an issue of resources, And in terms of the bigger issue for me isn't necessarily, even kind of the teaching or kind of taking the time to do the teaching. It's, thinking about, the cost of like riding the BART to campus. You know what I mean? Given my condition. So I think, even whether, look at the different kind of statuses of instructors there, and particularly thinking about ethnic studies and Asian American studies, people are politically committed to this work. I've been committed to Asian American studies since I was 18 years old. You know what I mean? So in terms of that's what allows me to do this work when I'm only getting paid $25,000. So I think at the end of the day, it's an issue of expanding resources.
I just wanted to add that something I think that's really important, speaking, as a part-timer a long time ago before I got my faculty position, that for leaders of institutions, what becomes key is that if you have the extra additional funding, you find it to compensate, our part-time faculty and as well as our full-time faculty, because they're going above and beyond serving our students so they can ensure that our students are successful both personally and academically. So it's really making sure that we're mindful about compensation and not just asking the faculty to yet again do this extra work because we have a new initiative coming down the pipeline.
Having been a faculty member, I get that. Every year I'd have to go to my department chair and here's the funding streams that are paying for my salary. This is how I'm spending my time. How are they aligned or not aligned? They go, oh, well, maybe I'll spend more time seeing more patients because you don't have enough research funding. Okay, I got that. So just, and unfortunately we're going to have to wrap this up soon, but you made reference to Advocacy, which is, I guess, is a federal funding stream, potentially sort of stream, and I also understand there's some challenges with that, especially if there's multiple ethnic studies centers because you only have one. Maybe you can you can elaborate on the strengths and weaknesses of the Advocacy program, and as just to help me sort of reflect on, well, is there something the state should be doing?
So we are both HSI and NRPC, and we just wait forever just to be qualified because someone is having an HSI grant, and one institution can only have one grant at a time. And then when it was our time, we asked for data, disaggregated data, which they have. It was so hard to access that from institutional research. So they just couldn't give us the data in time for us to apply to the grant. Ideally, because we have been working with Chicano studies, and so we would be glad to go in together to create a college pipeline, but the funding structure doesn't allow us to do that, and so we have to operate and compete with each other, and because of the model minority, we are considered not needing the grant. So that's the problem we face.
Additionally, what tends to happen too is because Advocacy funding is the new kid on the block around MSI, Minority Serving Institution funding, so it has much less. And so, for example, if you're dual designated, an institution will look at Hispanic serving categories for Department of Ed funding, and they'll see, oh, that can be up to $2.5 million, for a Title III HSI, even much more so for a STEM grant, versus Advocacy, we've got the Part A and then we've got the discretionary Part F, and those don't even come to the same levels, nor do we have a broad enough funding to capture all of the institutions across the country that are now eligible for Advocacy.
And just very briefly, so you mentioned so how much can you get from Anapesi if you're an Anapesi institution? I mean, I don't quite understand. So just
So
you mentioned that the Latino, you can get a much larger grant, or
yes. So initially, I think for the Part A grant, it's $2 million over 5 years, and then for the Part F discretionary, it was higher at the when they first offered the Part F. I think it was almost $2 million as well, but it's decreased, and I believe now it's $1.5 million for Part F.
Okay, and that's through the federal government, right?
Yes, correct.
Okay, all right.
So I always think it's a good day in government when I learn a new acronym. And I will admit to not having known this particular acronym. So Asian American, Native American, Pacific. So everybody here familiar with Anapesi? Am I the only one who wasn't? Good. But more importantly, this is a relatively new program. It's an Obama-era initiative, correct? Going back to 2008, 2009. Where does it stand with respect to the Department of Education right now? Is it something that we can count on moving forward, even at the current levels? You're shaking your head. And so I think this is meaningful.
I said right now we're still continuing with it, but there is that bill introduced, right, to get rid of the Department of Education by December 2018. So I don't know what's going to happen.
So, which raises the question: if this is the difference in many cases between sufficient funding or better funding, if it's a program that we can't count on in the future in California, what is the contingency, or is there one at the moment?
I think, again, it depends on the institution, but I think across, UC, CSU, and community colleges, now when we think of grant funding, we're really thinking about sustainability and institutionalizing, aspects of the program that we put in place. But again, there's not sufficient funding in the general operation fund to sustain the level when we do receive grants from the Department of Ed.
Yeah, we basically were told by our president that don't count on state fund, and now I guess federal fund as well. So we have to go and search for money ourselves through foundations, is what they want us to do. And it's really tough because we're serving a department, and we have lots of students who come to us, and it's very hard for faculty to teach 4 classes, do their own research and advising students. So we're really spread thin.
Okay, well, I think we can keep going for a long time, but I do have to keep the hearing. Thank you so very much for being here. Thank you for your presentation.
I do have a document that I want to.
Okay, yeah, I can hand that over. Okay, so let's bring up our next panel, which is Building a Pipeline for API Advocacy. We have Grace Yu, Faculty of Asian American Studies at San Francisco State University, Tim Fong, Faculty of Ethnic Studies at Sac State, Christine Chai, Asian Pacific American Leadership Institute, De Anza Community College, and Robin Rodriguez, Faculty of Asian American Studies at UC Davis, and National Board Member Association of Asian American Studies. And before we begin, I also just want to acknowledge that we do have representatives from Assemblymember Lowe's office. Are you here? Okay, we're there. Okay, that's Assemblymember Evan Lowe, and also Assemblymember Aguilar Curry's office as well, I believe. Okay, well, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you. And again, I want to thank our panelists, and if you can keep your remarks to 3 minutes, and hopefully we will have an opportunity to elaborate on those at our Q&A. So thank you, and Professor Yu, welcome.
Thank you. I'm the current chair of Asian American Studies at San Francisco State University. Can you hear me? No. Oh, sorry. I'm the current chair of Asian American Studies at San Francisco State University. I'm also the inaugural first-year experienced faculty director at San Francisco State University. I am also a principal investigator on an Anapesi grant at San Francisco State University called the Aspire Grant. So I'll be talking about the California State University Task Force on the advancement of ethnic studies, their recommendations. But before I get to that, I want to say that 30 years ago, I was an undergraduate at UC Irvine taking my first Asian American Studies class, and it was life-changing. I had never heard about Asian Americans in my public school education, and it was life-changing. it was the first time I heard about my family's history. It was also the first time I realized I had to fight for an education that I wanted. And so I remember being involved in several different movements at UC Irvine to institutionalize Asian American Studies, to go beyond one class. And so it's interesting, 30 years later, today in 2017, we are still fighting for a relevant education for our California populations. You know, in Asian American Studies, there's movements to expand Asian American Studies to include different communities in our classes and in our research. There's also movements to start new Asian American Studies programs, as well as sustain Asian American Studies programs. And this is a picture, by the way, of the 2016 San Francisco State demonstration and 10-day hunger strike. Students were demanding that ethnic studies be sustained and expanded. And I think Kent and several of you had talked about the history at San Francisco State. We are the first college of ethnic studies, and it has been institutionalized, and it was a 5-month battle to create the College of Ethnic Studies. But we are here, and we have 4 different departments: Africana Studies, American Indian Studies, Asian American Studies, and Latino Studies. I want to talk about, you know, I think several folks have talked about best practices in Asian American Studies in terms of curricular innovation, in terms of community outreach, in terms of retention and graduation. There are several different best practices in Asian American Studies. And we know that exposure to demographic and cultural diversity in the classroom impacts positively intellectual achievement and ability to interact positively in a multi-ethnic world. At San Francisco State, I know, Senator, you wanted to know about retention and graduation. I want to make mention that at San Francisco State, there is data that suggests that students who pass an ethnic studies course are more likely to graduate in 6 years. In fact, the campus-wide graduation rate for 6 years is 51%. But for students who take 2 or 3 ethnic studies courses and pass, the graduation rate in 6 years is 72%. And so ethnic studies makes a difference. And at the Cal State, this is Asian American Studies at different campuses. So I've got time, so I'm gonna kind of run through some my major points. Sorry, and these are pictures. So these are pictures of our innovative curriculum and community work that many of our courses do at the Cal State in Asian American Studies. So what are the challenges facing Asian American Studies at the Cal State? I want to talk about these challenges. These challenges include insufficient resources to sustain ethnic studies units, uncompensated and undercompensated work by ethnic studies directors and chairs, faculty, and lecturers, and then the inability of ethnic studies units to offer the number of courses needed to maintain the integrity of their programs. And finally, the denial of authorization to replace faculty when they leave, retire, or die. This is huge. The CSU Task Force on the Advancement of Ethnic Studies for the CSU have several recommendations, but these are their top 3 recommendations. And their first recommendation is to make ethnic studies a general education requirement within the system. And then the second recommendation is to increase and maintain regular and consistent hiring in ethnic studies in order to ensure vital sustainment and strategic growth. And finally, curricular development, to support curricular development in ways that strengthen ethnic studies departments and programs. And so that's the end. Thank you.
Thank you, and hopefully we'll have some more opportunities to elaborate on some of those things. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for this hearing. My name is Tim Fong. I'm a professor of ethnic studies. We know each other. And also I'm the director and principal investigator of the Full Circle Project at California State University, Sacramento. Sacramento State is designated as an ANAPISI. It's also designated as an HSI. We're dual designated, but through ANAPISI funding, we've received over $4 million in federal funding through 2 separate grants. Full Circle Project is the first program on our campus to address issues diverse AAPI students on our campus. Just really briefly, this is in a nutshell of what we do. We have academic support, and I want to highlight the fact that it's grounded in ethnic studies. Students, we have freshman students, 100 freshman students come in every year. They are in a two-semester learning community. They are required to take 2 courses of ethnic studies, Introduction to Asian American Studies and Introduction to Ethnic Studies. We also have student organizations and leadership. They are involved with the leadership development program, and they actually do community engagement off campus. So it's sort of the idea of full circle. We also want to highlight the fact that Educational Insights Center is a research and policy center that has tracked Full Circle Project students since the very beginning. And it's really important to understand the fact that the analysis has revealed that students, our Full Circle students, reach milestones at a higher rate than other AAPI students and higher than students in the campus in general. Even though 90% of our students are low income, 65% are first generation, and we have a high rate of remediation. Full Circle Project, according to the Ed Insights, is more likely to persist, more likely to complete more units, more credits, are at least as likely to complete important gateway courses like their general education courses, and are more likely to engage in behaviors that correlate with success, like attending full-time, enrolling in freshman seminar, completing success courses. In addition, Ed Insights highlight the fact that we have built a community on our campus, a pan-Asian community. In fact, many studies have looked at, in fact, there's a report by the Campaign for College Opportunities. University of Pennsylvania came out and did a study of Full Circle Project, and there is a book from Harvard University Press that profiles Full Circle Project and talks about the sense of community that is on our campus. And I'll talk about this in a little bit, but welcome you all to come to Sac State see our students. We have a new grant is for transfer students. We're bringing in 200 transfer students from the community colleges. And in this case, this is through Advocacy grant Part F, which I'll highlight in a little bit. And we aim to increase graduation rates, obviously, for students. And this program is specifically on college to career readiness. And so it's a need out there, and we want our students not only to graduate in an efficient manner, but to also get jobs. And we develop a peer mentor program and a career ambassador program. We want to showcase our students to employers. And this is just a quick nutshell. Same theory, focus on academic support, career center, and then internships. That's what we do. This is what I want to highlight here at Sacramento State. Sacramento State, we have demonstrated success with numbers, with data, and with ethnic studies and Asian American studies, and it's because of this that we have become institutionalized. And the achievements have been because of our NPZ funding and NPZ support. This is a real important chart that I really want to highlight. In red, 14 CSU campuses are NPZ. They are all HSI as well. 21 out of 23 campuses are HSI. But only 4 campuses in the CSU system have ever received NPZ funding. And in 2015, this is because of the issues that we talked about with the dual designation and the funding. In 2015, Cal State East Bay was awarded both an ANAPZ and an HSI grant, but had to turn down the ANAPZ. And similarly with Full Circle Project. I just want to move on to challenges, and I'll end here. Attention to Asian American Studies and API students may well decline as many CSU campuses without greater scrutiny from the legislature. And so I want to welcome legislators to come to Sac State, meet our students, and talk to President Nelson about the successes of Full Circle Project. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thanks very much. Great job at Sac State. In my district.
You have an office on our campus.
Hi, is this on? Okay. Good morning. My name is Christine Chai, and I'm an instructor at De Anza College and the internship director for Asian Pacific American Leadership Institute at De Anza. I'm here to speak to you about APALI as a model for API advocacy and the importance of a program like this, an Asian American Studies program, with the help also of the ANAPISI funding. A little background, APALI was established in 1997 by Dr. Michael Chang, who couldn't be here, so I'm here on his behalf. He is the chair of the Asian American Studies Department at De Anza, and along with local API community leaders at the time, helped form this program. It is now recently an established nonprofit 501c3, largely in order to sustain this program due to sometimes lack of institutional funding and support. Through the years, APALI developed 4 programs, 2 for youth and 2 for working professionals and public officials, all with the same mission of training socially conscious and effective civic leaders. The model for leadership development at APALI is built upon 4 things in rotation. It's education, mentorship, networking, and recruitment. Since 1997, APALI has graduated over 1,300 leaders, and today I'm going to focus on the youth programs. It must be noted that under the ANAPISI grant, the Impact API program at De Anza funded and supported APALI by incorporating our youth summer program as part of the leadership and civic engagement pathway, particularly helping us recruit within the historically marginalized target populations of Southeast Asian, Filipino, and Pacific Islander students. So one of our programs is the Youth Leadership Academy. It's a summer program and a leadership class for De Anza College and high school students. It continues to be the central program and heart of APALI, and it has inspired and motivated many of our students and introduced most of them to their first Asian American Studies class, exposing them to relevant issues and possibilities for growth within and beyond our communities. The next program is the College Internship Program. It's a mentorship program and a paid internship comprised of 7 or more college-aged individuals who practice their leadership skills and play a pivotal role in shaping and educating our Youth Leadership Academy community and students. Impact API also funded this program by providing the money for the stipends to pay for our student mentors. Also, through the alumni program, our growing network, APALI continues to sustain its involvement in our local and broader community. Most recently, we recognized many of our alumni at our 20th anniversary banquet. You can recognize perhaps Evan Lowe up there, an alumni. So with students in our various sectors in the public sector, policy and advocacy, education, and the private sector, you can see that for our alums working in these sectors, being graduates of APALI, the realization of its vision to foster a true pipeline of AAP advocates really happened. Something that we're proud of, but again, we wouldn't be able to sustain this program without the support of the institution and definitely our faculty and students. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to go ahead and launch in directly into my remarks. So Asian American Studies has built a pipeline for API advocacy in 2 ways. Now I'll focus primarily on Davis, but we can speak more during the comment section about the broader kinds of impacts. But 2 key ways. 1, our notable Asian American alums. I'm not going to run through all of them, but clearly I just want to showcase a small handful of our notable alumni and what they have accomplished. Many of you are familiar with our alumni here from UC Davis. Beyond these, we have alumni who have gone on to pursue advanced degrees, do research on APIs, and grow the field of Asian American Studies. Our current students serve an array of community-based organizations as interns, and eventually, when they graduate, staff. So these are just a range of the partner organizations where our students have served, but and this is just a small subset. But I want to talk about the second major way that we have built a pipeline for API advocacy, and that's through our research. These organizations, again, are not simply organizations our students work with, but many of us, speaking as faculty at UC Davis, have worked with these same groups on research addressing critical community needs. Looking at the types of groups represented here, you see that our research supports the most marginalized members of our community, from trafficked migrant workers, to the undocumented, to the incarcerated, to those who are victimized by xenophobia and Islamophobia. We also work on issues long ignored by the traditional disciplines in the social sciences and the humanities, such as the mental health struggles of APIs, or the transnational political engagement of different Asian ethnic groups, to the unique forms of artistic and cultural production by APIs. Given our now nearly 50-year track record at UC Davis and the UC system more broadly, I want to make the following entreaty to both the APILC and the Senate Select Committee. Number one, in the immediate term, work with us. We truly have our finger on the pulse of the community. Drawing from our expertise makes for good public policy. Additionally, your collaboration with us can bring attention and legitimacy for Asian American studies on our campuses, where, frankly, we are often marginalized, invisible, and devalued, even here. And this is true across the system. Immediately in March, we will have the Association for Asian American Studies National Meeting in San Francisco. Come and join us, get to know us. Help us shape higher educational policy, specifically budget commitments to higher education, to ensure the growth and sustainability of Asian American studies in this great state where Asian American studies was born. And in a moment when nationally we face a range of threats as a field, intimidation tactics, litigation, even legislation that attempts to shut ethnic studies and Asian American studies down. I also urge this body to conduct a separate hearing that examines API access to and experiences of higher education. The students will speak for themselves in the public comment section. Finally, that this may be the first time that members of the APILC and the Senate Select Committee have actually had sustained discussions with the scholars and educators here is rather unfortunate, and I hope this marks the beginning of a long-term partnership. Thank you.
There you go. Well, first of all, am I getting an invitation to the conference?
Yes, you are. That was an open invitation to all the members of both the Senate Select Committee and the APILC. Thank you.
No, I appreciate the comments from the panel. I should mention that this Select Committee actually took a bit of work to even get established, and I do want to thank the Senate leadership and Senate President Pro Tem Senator De Leon for his work both to actually appoint the Select Committee as well as actually even funding a staffer, not for the Select Committee, but for the API Legislative Caucus. So, we are trying to play a little catch up here in the Senate, but certainly our leadership recognizes the very important role that API play in the state of California and wants to try to enhance that, and that's why we're also having this hearing as well. And we actually have a whole select committee, not just to do one hearing, but so we can do subsequent hearings as well. So again, I appreciate that. Do you have any questions? Or? No. Okay. So actually, we're talking about building a pipeline, and so I guess one of the questions I have is you are educating, people are either whether they're majoring in your department or taking classes and so forth through the various programs. What kind of things do you currently do, or what are things that you envision doing for the students who are coming through either majoring or taking the courses in terms of career development, and where are people going, and where do you think the opportunities are to connect the students in your programs and your courses to opportunities, career opportunities after they complete their studies?
So I'm at San Francisco State University, and I've done a LinkedIn analysis of my alumni. And those that have majored in Asian American Studies, 50% have gone on to teaching, and they're at the K-12. And I think a lot of it has to do of the efforts of my colleague, Professor Alison Tintiango-Kubales, who has a doctorate in education, who's been working on creating a pipeline. So 50% of our graduates go into teaching. Another 25% go into social work, nonprofit work. And we actually, it's interesting, we also have about 15% that go into nursing and health-related fields. So even though they might have majored in Asian American Studies, they went on to get their RN at a local community college, and they're working as a nurse. And so those are kind of the major areas where our alumni are at. And again, we are we have 16 different diverse tenure track faculty members, and so our work is always sort of helping students with their careers. And we're quite diverse, and so I think we do that in all the different areas. But teaching is kind of where our students are going into.
The data on our students is very similar to San Francisco State. I want to highlight the fact, something that President Nelson always talks about, a high percentage of students at Sac State, they come from families that make less than $38,000 a year. And a degree from Sac State and support for a job is what we're doing right now with our second grant. And the reality is it's what I call value added. That when we support a student to get a good job, and in our area, Sacramento, government is the largest employer in the area, and a good civil service job with government can really enhance not only an individual student but an entire family. We have an example of two students, full circle students, who both work for Department of Finance. They actually happen to have seats right next to each other in the same office, but they're both from Full Circle Project. So all those areas plus government service as well.
So can they put into the budget a line item for Asian American Studies?
Well, I think the key is to keep tuition low. I get really concerned when students start taking out loans. I've heard of students taking out a $50,000 loan to be at the CSU. But, if it's $25,000 with tuition and room and board, people are going to have to take out loans. And many of our students want to do public service, but it can be a barrier to wanting to do public service if you've got these loans. And so I think I just have a plea to the state legislator is to keep our tuition low. Right now it's crazy, $25,000 for a CSU education, room and board, and tuition. It poses many difficulties. And plus, we're in San Francisco, and people are then dealing with high rents and all. We have students working 30 to 40 hours a week. So I plead with the state legislator in terms of trying to keep our tuition low. I'm highly concerned about that.
At De Anza College, through the APALI program, I think over 20 years we've graduated so many students, right? And through the program itself, there's a large alumni now. And so that alumni is very active. Mentorship is a big part of the program. So I think when we have our graduates, there's a huge networking component as part of the program. Again, the program has been hard to sustain just institutionally. So Dr. Michael Chang has had to rely on community donors. And this is part of the reason why it has recently been established as its own 501c3 as well.
Just again, speaking in terms of our students and kind of their outcomes, I think you've seen a couple of them, and some you're very familiar with them. Annie Lam, Andrew Medina, who actually worked for the APILC. And so actually this very hearing is a product of our trying to kind of really create programs for our students. It's a requirement for graduation with an Asian American Studies degree to have an internship with a community-based partner organization or in the legislature. And so part of this hearing ultimately was started off as just trying to get interns placed. And we've had interns placed. We had a recent grad who's actually here, William Chan, who works for Cants and Shoes office now. There's several other students who have been placed in community-based organizations that then went on not long right after graduation to take on staff positions. So the internship program, at least in our here at UC Davis, has been really crucial in in kind of creating this pipeline. We formalize these relationships with the legislative offices, with schools, with community-based organizations. We require students do that time, and then it translates in very, very concrete ways, in positive ways for them and for the community.
So one of the things that as we're thinking about building this pipeline for advocacy, of course, we serve in the legislature. I think this may be a little easier for UC Davis and Sac State because the legislature, you're near the Capitol. I think one of the observations that some of us had made is that actually, in some ways, you're trying to figure out where your students are going or trying to place them. We're actually looking for more people who have the knowledge that you're teaching to be able to go and work on staffs, and whether it's the legislature or administration and so forth. A little bit of not entirely a joke about your folks in finance, but we need to have advocates in the sort of the ecosystem of the Capitol, which actually not only includes, by the way, working on on the legislative staff or administration, but also working for very important advocacy organizations as well. So, they may be advocating for, I don't know, dentists or some company or some nonprofit, but also helping out and also recognizing there's an API component to that, and supporting other API to create that kind of community. So if you're interested in hearing some of your thoughts about what can be done, I realize you're on the front end of the pipeline, I'm sort of on the other end, but some of the thoughts that you might have about trying to build that pipeline so we could have more not API who are engaged, but also ones who are educated in the history of our community in the Capitol community.
Let me address that, especially with our freshman program. It's Learning Community. They take Introduction to Asian American Studies, so our students learn about themselves and other APIs. They are also required to take Introduction to Ethnic Studies, so they learn about African Americans, Latinos, and Native Americans as well. So they have a very broad perspective. We also focus on leadership development and coalition building, meaning that they have to work, they know they have to work with other people, and in fact, we do have courses that focus on having them present contemporary issues coalitions where they work with other groups on campus and off campus. We've also had, we want to get people more involved with the community, but also with government as well. We have had Evan Lowe speak on our campus. He's a CSU alum. We've actually had Rob Bonta. I wish he was here because he could tell you it was Rob Bonta and his mother both spoke at Sac State. It was great. It was really great. And so in many ways, even though a lot of our students live in Sacramento area and the Capitol's right here, never really get engaged with the with politics at all. So we're providing them that opportunity, not only on the grassroots level, we're very involved obviously with the community, but also increasingly wanting to get engaged with government service. And I know at Poly, we're very interested in working with them.
So I just want to say at San Francisco State, students are required to do a 60-hour internship with a community organization. Professor Dariotis organizes that class, so that's part of their major requirement. I also want to say that we do have alumni that do want to be at the state capitol. This last summer, we had our one of our recent graduates, Shannon Deloso, that was an intern at the Director of Consumer Affairs Office. And so we welcome that. So if you have, those possibilities, please send them to San Francisco State. Thank you.
So just a couple of comments. One way certainly is, I think, through graduate education. I mean, that's perhaps something that hopefully can get expanded because, unfortunately, at least at the UCs, not all the UCs have graduate programs, including here at UC Davis. So hopefully that's a direction we could take. And I think specifically an API public policy master's program, I think makes sense here. And then we can kind of directly work towards that. And even partnering with the School of Education more formally around training teachers in ethnic studies. But I actually want to underscore research. I actually think that's where we're we're completely undervalued. And that is that, across the University of California is a research institution. We are all expected to publish or perish, to produce knowledge. And so I think this is really where I think legislators can and should be more, to link with us. Again, I kind of talked about it. Just as an example, 2 weeks ago, I gave testimony at the DLSC, the Department of Labor Standards and Employment in Oakland, on a piece of legislation that really, had I not been there to offer my expert testimony, would have basically not covered a vast population of Philippine migrant workers. Now, that's a shame, and I got called in at the last minute. And I think that this is true for so many other issues. We do this work. We're not that far. Just, have us come, and we can kind of provide some of that information, whether it's informally or formally in the form of a hearing. But I think the research piece is really crucial, and so therefore, supporting the growth of Asian American Studies research agendas is really, really vital, especially at the University of California, which, mind you, it's not as if there isn't the money there. I mean, the UC has reported how, the California state budget, there's much more goes towards prison expenditures than higher education. And so, okay, well, that's a point to be debated potentially, but I think the reality is that budgets reflect values. Let's have our California budget reflect the values that we have. And I would imagine that this is a value we have, is to ensure deep and nuanced knowledge about a really vital community to the state of California.
I want to also highlight just really briefly that Full Circle Project is not only a student support program, but an academic enterprise. And we have raised a couple $100,000 from local foundations to create what we call API survey panels. It's 6 counties. We are going to be recruiting different API organizations and individuals to be regularly surveyed on certain issues like healthcare, like public safety, like education. And our first report is actually going to be, our first survey is going to be in January. But we utilize our students also to help do the research and do the interviewing.
Very quickly. So, we've mentioned at different points the needs you folks have to go out and find private funds for some of your work. And I worry sometimes that if you get too good at that, we in the legislature take advantage of that. And I think, Ms. Rodriguez, you are absolutely right. Budgets do reflect priorities. Do not get so good at that you don't come to us and advocate very fiercely, because this is important. And a well-rounded education is essential, for the workforce of the future. If we get too focused on graduation rates at the expense of other things, that's a huge mistake, I think, as everybody realizes here. And the thing that gives you passion will take you furthest in life. So I commend you for all the work you're doing in that regard.
If I may, just really quickly about the funding issue. It should be noted, when it comes to federal funding, that's a real challenge for Asian American Studies faculty at the UCs, in part because we are an interdisciplinary field, and mind you, not universal across the U.S. You saw that social struggles, social activist movements, what created Asian American Studies. And so it's very, very uneven across the U.S. where these programs exist, and to what extent we're actually visible to federal agencies is a real a challenge. We're interdisciplinary often by training in our approaches, and the major funding kind of bodies like the National Science Foundation or the National Education for the Endowment for Humanities, for instance, really favor these disciplinary approaches. Never mind the fact that they also fail to really disaggregate API data. And so they treat us like every other agency does. And so, really vital research of very kind of underrepresented groups cannot get done because they don't recognize it. So that's really a problem.
I'm getting some words from my colleagues who've said we need to fund an Asian American Policy Institute. And I know at San Francisco State University, there are several colleagues that are working to build that. I also want to remind the state legislator, it's so hard to get new faculty lines at the CSU. We can only get them when they retire, when people retire, die, or leave. And so, there's such a need in various communities across this country, in this state, that would like to see something in ethnic studies and Asian American studies about their community. And so I'm just pleading with you all to see, how can you get CSU more faculty? And why does it have to be when people die, leave, or retire? So that's just putting that out.
So I just and then I know there's so many more questions, so I have one sort of final question before we wrap up. Although I will say is that certainly in the budget process, I think we've worked very hard, many of us, to get more funding to higher ed. We also have to deal with at UC, the regents are very specific about we're independent. You just give us the money, we allocate it. Don't tell us how to spend it. And even at CSU, the trustees, so I mean, they're the ones who, we've pushed back against tuition increases. They've said we need to raise tuition. That's same with the regents. I think in terms of also sometimes in terms of funding and directing that funding, again, the trustees have and the president's office have their own ideas as well. So we're putting in more money, and then it's not following through when it gets down to you. So we've got to figure out how to work that. But actually, my last question actually is about political will, because since we talk about budgets and so forth, what are some of the things, I mean, in many ways, because of where I said I used to be a faculty member at the university, and now I'm in the political will business. I'm in the research business anymore, and part of it is like, how do we build the political will to get more resources to value Asian American studies and ethnic studies? What can we kind of do as we think about the pipeline and as we look at our students and so forth, to from your perspective in terms of trying to get the kind of support you're looking for and not be invisible anymore, right? So, the reason we're holding this hearing is I'm trying to elevate this issue and bring this to my colleagues, and I want to just assure you that even though you may say, well, there's only two of you here, actually this is a hearing of the state senate, so this information goes out to all my colleagues, and so it's more, it has tremendous significance. But I also want to hear from you about what can we do to create that political will to bring Asian American studies and ethnic studies so that Asian Americans are not invisible, that there's that people remember to call on people to you to help provide information. We did fight for disaggregation of data, and I remember Banta, and I was pleased to jockey his bill, and we actually unfortunately ran into some resistance from some folks who used some members of our own community to try to delay that. But aside from that, let's just your thoughts on how do we build that will so that we can get the kind of support that you're pleading for.
Let me just highlight the fact that the data disaggregation has been talked about before, and I know with the Bonta bill, it did not really necessarily include higher education, that higher education said they would do it, or they promised to do it, but it really hasn't happened, or it varies from campus to campus. But data disaggregation is really important. It takes cultural change on every campus, and for us at Sac State, and I'll just speak for us, we deal with the model minority image, but through using data and working with our Office of Institutional Research, I showed that there are a number of API population subgroups that actually had lower graduation rates, retention rates than African Americans and Latinos on our campus. And I would tell administrators this, and they said, oh, I didn't know that. And then I tell them 2 weeks later, and they said, oh, I didn't know that. So I went right by them, right? So it took literally years for them to really, oh, now they get it. Now they can say it. And I know you've met with President Nelson before, and he says it. He talks about it, and it's not just because I'm around. He will say that all over wherever he goes. So that's changing the culture, but you don't change the culture unless you have data to work with, and in our case, and in everybody's cases, having programs that work, that show they work, not just, oh, we need to help APIs, but we need to help APIs, and we have programs that work.
I think this goes a long way, and I do have to thank Senator Pan, thank you so much. I think that this makes a huge difference for us as a beginning step, giving us a platform, a statewide platform to be able to talk about what we do, so that the broader public knows and your colleagues know kind of what we can offer as a field. So certainly I think that if we can continue these sorts of hearings, I can imagine, for instance, in the future, very specific kinds of research hearings, really just about what have we found relative to the state of California. because we can certainly assemble a really stellar group of faculty who could just speak to that. So I think on a regular basis, if we can formalize even a kind of relationship between the Senate Select Committee and the APILC for regular hearings of this, not, I think, somewhat different of this than this, but really to kind of look at, this is what we know about this community, and then, you, of course, would run with it in terms of what that it might mean for you. I think there's that piece. I mean, also, I think, it will also depend, I think, in the people in this room, and to what extent we all get together and leverage the fact that we have this opportunity, a public platform, and what we do on our respective campuses to really kind of leverage this for ourselves. So, I mean, it's going to require this kind of concerted effort, but certainly I think I don't see how, especially, given we've gathered all these people together, how we can't continue to do this sort of a thing. And I think it would be helpful. It will prove kind of impactful for the local campuses where hearings like this get held.
By the way, I just want to say there is political will. At San Francisco State in 2016, there was a 10-day hunger strike. Students were organized. They wanted to see things in the curriculum: Pacific Islander studies, Muslim studies. These are new areas within ethnic studies and Asian American studies that need to be expanded. And so there is will. This state is continually diversifying. And at the same time, fees have gone up by 3 times more than when I was an undergraduate. So there is will. There is will. I think, as Robin has mentioned, forums such as this really help you hear from the public, and hopefully you can also direct our students and our colleagues on what are the best practices in terms of approaching the state legislator.
I just want to underscore the importance again of a forum like this, and like Grace and Robin have mentioned, listening to our student voices, and I believe we're moving in that direction, and so that's what I'm really looking forward to hearing.
Excellent. Well, I want to thank the panel so much. Thank you so very much. There's, once again, a lot more questions we could ask, but thank you. All right. Well, especially with the field to hear from our students, I know we now going to have public comment. And I do ask if you can try to limit your comment to 1 to 2 minutes. I appreciate it, so we can be sure everyone has an opportunity to speak. Actually, are we going to have people go? So we're going to have people see the microphones standing over there, so people can line up to find that microphone. And what I like to do is, first of all, ask you to introduce yourself, your name, if you're representing any organization or institution, or to state that organization or institution, and then if you have comments on what's been presented here, and again, if you can try to keep your comments to 1 or 2 minutes, and if someone else already said it, you can say me too as well, and then add your own take as well. So, all right, with that, if there's no other questions, we'll take our first comment.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lilo, and I'm with the Southeast Asia Resource Action Center. I'm their policy associate. We are the only national advocacy organization for Southeast Asians, and we also represent the largest refugees resettled here in the United States as well. And like many have said before me, that there have been many attempts to erase our communities from their from here in the United States and their history as well. And Asian American Studies is a statement of resistance to all attempts of erasure. And similarly, aggregated data of Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander continues to stand as a founding barrier to Asian American Pacific Islanders in many institutions. And thankfully, the state legislature last year did pass AB 1726, which was a bill that CRAC also co-sponsored as well. And however, that doesn't do enough. We still need there is still a lot of need in data disaggregation as well. And because it is unjust to say that 12% of Asian American youth live in poverty when 42% of Hmong American and 33% of Cambodian American youth live in poverty. And it would be unjust to assume that these youth also have the same start line. And because while 47% Asian American 11th graders were deemed ready for college English in 2014, only 14% of Laotian and 11% of Hmong 11th graders were deemed ready for college English. And without data disaggregation, we cannot dismantle the model minority myth, and we cannot achieve equity for each individual AAPI community. And because of the lack of disaggregated data, our community actually sought to collect our own data. And because of that, we have collected over 800 responses from AAPI Youth in California. And we are actually in collaboration with the Asian American Pacific Island Boys and Men of Color Coalition, helping achieve racial and gender equity. We'll be sharing out on our findings of this report, and we invite you all and the state legislature to also attend the State of Asian American Pacific Islander Youth on November 6th from 11 a.m. to 1:30 p.m., co-hosted by the Senate Select Committee on API Affairs and the API Legislative Caucus. I also have left flyers out on the front too. Thank you so much, and we hope to see you all there to learn about the transformative moment in which California AAPI Youth have given us the direction that they would like to see. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Since you were pitching something for my committee, I let you run a little longer. Okay. All right. Welcome.
Hi. My name is Blaine, and I'm from Anakbayan, Silicon Valley, and I was a former De Anza College and community college student. And I'm here representing Anakbayan, Silicon Valley. We actually have a national campaign called Take Back Your Education, which actually demands for culturally relevant and accessible ethnic studies, redirecting military spending budgets from the state and federal level in order to go back to social services like housing, healthcare, and education. I even have a supplementary document that I can be able to give to you after my public comment. Because we also have local demands in the Santa Clara County asking for Filipino classes at De Anza College and San Jose State, and the range of it could be Tagalog language classes, history and culture, especially at schools that have a huge concentration of Filipinos. In addition to providing more retention programs for underrated AAPI communities in the Santa Clara County, in addition to having more full-time faculty representative to the community attending these schools, and also just from what Dr. Robin Rodriguez was talking about, when our budget is also reflective of what our values are. When we think about how the military spending and prison spending are very high, and understanding how funds and resources for education are really cut, how can and we were just trying to think about how can we be able to provide for our communities, and I think redirecting those funds is one way to do so. Thanks.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. Just maybe one brief comment. Thank you. So I just certainly I think the legislature is concerned about how much we spend on corrections. I do want to just also to be sure everyone's on the same page. We spend the largest expenditure in the state budget general fund is K through 12 education community college, so that's about 40%, followed by healthcare, followed actually by higher ed. There was I think a year or two where corrections was higher in higher ed, but actually we do spend more on higher ed than we need to spend on corrections, and then corrections is number 4. So not to say that we shouldn't spend less. In fact, that's something we have frequent discussions about what we can try to do around how much we spend on corrections and rehabilitation. But I just want to be sure everyone put in context exactly where your state general fund money is going to. So, okay. Right.
This is just more so regarding the national campaign.
Sure. No, of course. No, and I appreciate your comments. So this is not to disagree with what you said. So, okay, thank you.
Yeah, hello, my name is Amado Kenham. I'm a student at Laney College, and I'm also involved with the National Alliance of Filipino Concerns, representing various community organizations throughout the Bay Area, including Rise Up Yolo County, including Anakbayan, and various other community organizations. But more specifically, I'm from Laney College. I'm a current community college student. I actually missed college today to come to this. You know what I'm saying? And it's located right in the heart of Oakland and Chinatown. So speaking as a Filipino student, it is important to me that Filipino studies is included within the framework of Asian American studies. I had grown up with the K-12 educational system where all I got to learn about Filipinos and my people is that tiny little paragraph where we're talking about Americans liberating us from the Spanish and again liberating us from the Japanese. I never got to learn about the Filipino manongs in the UFW. I never knew that 6,000 of my fellow Filipinos leave the Philippines every single day to work as disposable labor throughout the world. And due to one-sided economic agreements that perpetuate poverty in my homeland. As a Filipino-American student, I want to see culturally relevant education, not just in the college level, but also high school as well. Culturally relevant education will also support our Asian and Pacific Islander community at Laney College, whom experience disproportionately high dropout rates and low retention. Yet students are often discouraged to take these classes due to the misconception that these classes are prereqs to majors that won't put food on the table. But we should change that. We want this education to be available to all, especially given the benefits that it will produce. And real quick, something that I wanted to highlight, at Laney College we're also, I think the person before me couldn't make it, so I'm kind of asking for extra time if that's okay. At Laney College we're also under the threat of the Oakland A Stadium, which is proposed to be built right across the street, which will cause hundreds of working-class Asian American immigrant families to be impacted by heightened gentrification. The root of this issue is that our community colleges are underfunded, and our public education is increasingly privatized to the point where the Peralta district sees the stadium as an opportunity to make more money. Yet, we are supposed to be sanctuary campuses, right? Yet, this decision will further displace and militarize these communities of color, particularly significant undocumented populations within our community. The fight doesn't just end with culturally relevant education.
Actually, if you can wrap up.
Okay, yeah, that's the last sentence. My bad. But to take a stand against the privatization of education and to commit standing against the militarization of our communities. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you. I do want, actually, quite apropos, I do want to to just mention that we are now joined by the chair of the API Legislative Caucus, who also is the first Filipino American to be elected to the state legislature, Assemblymember Rob Bonta. Okay, thank you.
My name is Michelle. I'm a UC Davis alumni and I work at My Sister's House. My Sister's House is a local organization that serves Asian and Pacific Islander women who have been affected by domestic violence, sexual assault, and human trafficking. I'm here to talk about sexual assault and how that affects AAPIs in higher education. A growing concern among college campuses currently is sexual assault. I'm sure you've heard the numbers. 1 in 5 women are sexually assaulted during that time on campus. Asian women are even more likely to be sexually assaulted, and the UC system is largely comprised of Asian students. Reporting and talking about sexual assault is difficult for anyone. It's a personal topic, and historically survivor stories haven't been received well. As much as the Me Too campaign might be happening in our nation, it is not happening yet within our Asian Pacific Islander community, at least not visibly. There are also additional barriers Asian survivors face when reporting and accessing services. This includes language barriers, immigration worries, religious concerns, and cultural considerations. These concerns stop Asian survivors from reporting and even from accessing services. We have a responsibility to provide students with a safe learning environment. There needs to be increased funding so sexual assault survivors can have safety at schools, and funding so that we can address the culturally specific needs Asian survivors have. The needs of Asian survivors are specific and diverse, and a one-size-fits-all method is not the best course, especially when talking about a topic as sensitive as sexual assault. Additional funding is needed to provide interpreters, translations, and train sexual assault staff that can provide culturally responsive services. Professors and administrators need to take small steps, such as inviting local community resources to speak in their classroom, and big steps such as budgeting for service providers to be on-site and available for students. With such fiscal support and commitment, can we ensure that students graduate successfully and safely complete their education?
Thank you. Thank you. Welcome.
Okay. Hello, my name is Austin Taramoto. I'm a scholar staff retention coordinator for Bridge Filipinx Outreach and Retention, which is a community program housed under the campus department of the Student Recruitment and Retention Center located downstairs. We were created 30 years ago to address a growing decline in admissions and retention rates of Filipinx students at UC Davis. But after these 30 years, this work is still relevant and needed in the Filipinx community. A vital aspect of what Bridge does is involves creating spaces for Filipinx students to find home and community at UC Davis. And we achieve this goal through the implementation of culturally relevant education, a process that is underscored by the work of Asian American studies and the scholar activists who retell our stories and do not dilute these stories under the guise of liberal multiculturalism. The The power and the value of Asian American studies rests in the education and the empowerment of students to explore their own culture and history through a critical lens that interrogates and seeks to unravel the ties of white supremacy and settler colonialism that permeate through every aspect of this society. The endangerment of Asian American studies, of ethnic studies, through budget cuts and lack of administrative support is frightening and serves as a subtle act of violence toward communities of color on this campus. The endangerment of Asian American studies further highlights the willful erasure and the wrongful retellings of our knowledge, our truths, and our narratives. We are tired of seeing the state and university facilitate in this erasure. And for all the administrators who are in this room, we are angered at the continuous acceptance and the protection of hate speech and the simultaneous criminalization of those who speak against it. We are angered at the continued acts of bigotry and toward the queer and trans people and the lack of urgency by the state to address these issues, and we demand the faculty to do better. We are angered at the hyper-militarization of police on college campuses and across the nation, and we need to feel safe in order to thrive and be retained in this university. We will continue to fight, and we expect you to understand the necessity and the importance of Asian American studies, though we know that the change and liberation that we wish to see for us and the communities that build partnership will not come from the hands of the state. We at least expect you to acknowledge our existence in all of its complexities.
Thank you. Thank you. Welcome.
Hello, my name is Michelle. I'm representing the Vietnamese language movement, and our mission is to promote Vietnamese language learning for the purpose of cultural awareness, community engagement, and providing opportunities for personal and professional advancements. So I'm an undergraduate student actually coming from the science side. I'm hoping to go into healthcare, and I can actually see where this will affect our community through my work at the student-run clinic serving the underserved community in Sacramento. So multilingualism is an immeasurable advantage in all fields of study, not just healthcare, but also in business. As of late 2016, Vietnam holds an economic growth rate of over 6% and continues to be a leading or a rising star or rising country in the world. And as Vietnam and the United States engages in interdisciplinary ventures, there's a rising interest and opportunity to work with the country. Therefore, I find it necessary that we equip our students with the tools for effective communication in order to contribute to the overall economic productivity of the world. At UC Davis, Asian Americans are 42% of the student population, with Vietnamese being the second largest number within that group. Yet, our campus still doesn't have Vietnamese language courses, and there are currently already 11 universities in California with Vietnamese language courses. So if we want to be a leader in providing the best educational opportunities for our students, which also benefit our community, we have to have Vietnamese language at UC Davis. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Hello, everybody. Senator Pan. My name is Tito Huang. I'm actually alumni of UC Davis and UC Santa Cruz 20 years ago. But I come with you today as the president of the Vietnamese American community and also as a business owner, tax and financial planner. And I wanted to convey this message to you guys that whatever this you guys are learning today, the question you need to ask yourself is, how is your life going to be like? What role would you play in the community next 5 or 10 years? The problem with us as community leaders and business owners are seeing is that there's a disconnect. There's a cultural disconnect and there's a language disconnect. A lot of the people that you serve look like our parents and uncles' generations. Many of you seen the Vietnam War series with Ken Burns and Ken Lennox, and it talks about the diaspora of the Vietnamese American community, the Southeast Asian refugees coming in here. Well, guess what, guys? Those are your client base. Those are your peers. Those are people who's going to be looking up to you. And the problem with what happened with academic is that we forget that as you learn here, how does the skill that you learn carried over to those real life experiences? And I think what happened here is that UC Davis is a great institution for education, but what does it teach you in terms of cultural competence, language competence? And I think I hope that we recognize the importance of that aspect, and as you serve and become a community member or business owner, it behooves you to know that, because a large part of our client base come from Asia now. And if you want to be a good worker and a successful and marketable person, you got to be having the language and the culture skills. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks very much. Before we move on to the next part, I understand that there's also a representative from Senator Kansan Chu's office here. There you go. Okay, well, thank you. All right, excellent. Thank you. Welcome.
Hi, my name is Guling Carolyn Valverde, Associate Professor of Asian American Studies and Director of the New Vietnam Studies Initiative here at UC Davis. In the 2 minutes allowed, I want to discuss the important trend that Asian American Studies has taken in the past few decades towards transnationalism and how centers like Vietnam, the New Vietnam Studies Initiative can positively impact the lives of our students and faculty and growth of California following similar trends. And so, as many talked about, Southeast Asians and in particular Vietnamese Americans are often misstudied, misunderstood, and therefore often invisible. However, with the rise in Vietnam, the population of 37 million, 97% are literate, as well as having most population of Vietnam is under 30. The diaspora is over 2 million, with 1 million in the United States, and the vast majority are in California. So with the interest in the correct studies and more research and also the expansion transnationally, UC Davis was encouraged to start the New Vietnam Studies Initiative, and it brings together scholars from the STEM, sciences and humanities, and social science. And what we do is, our mission is to bring together scholars, industry experts, government officials, activists, and artists to lend their knowledge of many dimensions that comprise contemporary Vietnam. New Vietnam Studies, or the study of economic reconstruction and cultural renewal of Vietnam, will help move this country beyond the major conflicts of its recent history to chart its own course. And even though we've had symposium with international speakers and had governments, the highest ranking governments in the history of any university come to campus, the general secretary, the ambassador. Most of the work we've done is to volunteer, and most of them are done through organization of undergraduate students, which we encourage because we want them to continue this research, but there is not funding. So we hope that a panel like yours will encourage initiatives like this that are really trying to correct a lot of the issues that were already mentioned here. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I have a document.
Thank you. Oh, excellent. Thank you. Welcome.
Hi. Hi, my name is Amy Lin. I'm a graduate student in the Department of Ethnic Studies at UC Berkeley, and I'm also an undocumented activist affiliated with Aspire, the first Pan-Asian undocumented youth organization in the U.S. So I'm here today, but I want to begin with a brief story to underscore the relevance of Asian American studies. So I grew up in Daly City, which is a sizable suburb in the San Francisco Peninsula. I never knew how to talk about my undocumented status because the discussions were always about undocumented Latinx folks. But it changed when I first enrolled in an Asian American Studies class at City College of San Francisco, where I began my higher education schooling. And in that, I learned about the histories of exclusions endured by Asians and also other people of color here in the United States in myriad ways, right? Still, Asian American studies, then as now, for me, carries its own blind spots because it's oftentimes institutionalized and watered down to some extent, right? Because of the funding, because of the lack of resources that we have. Still, that sort of deeming aspiration changed when I transferred to UCLA, where I had the opportunity to take Professor Ken Wong's class, who spoke earlier, to really learn about the value and power of community-engaged scholarship. So now, as an inspiring educator, I want to urge that we continue advocating for Asian American studies and continuing its mission to uplift marginalized voices. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks very much. Welcome.
Hi, my name is Wei Ming Dariotis, and I'm here to speak to you about depth. Although my PhD is in English literature, a field that offers many academic jobs, while I was in graduate school, I learned what it was to feel marginalized in academia. So I chose to complete many undergraduate courses in Asian American Studies while doing my coursework for my PhD. And then I chose to pursue a career in Asian American Studies at SFSU, where I have taught since 1999. We offer 6 distinct courses in Asian American literature, everything from Asian American children's literature to the literatures of Filipino, Vietnamese, and South Asian Americans, groups that would rarely, if ever, be taught in a survey course of Asian American literature, much less in a multicultural literature course, get whole semesters devoted to the creativity of their inner lives, what is recognized as the core of our humanity. This is important because it speaks to the need for more ethnic studies, more specificity, not less. At SFSU, we are addressing this need by creating a minor in critical mixed race studies, which will be the first degree granting program in this field. Critical mixed race studies is a field that has been nurtured, especially in Asian American studies. The definition of the field was co-authored by myself, Laura Kina, and Camila Fojas, 3 mixed race Asian American women. Unlike most people of color, mixed race, mixed ethnicity, and transracially adopted people do not have parents who share their identities and experiences. These subjects are also not taught in the K-12 curriculum. Therefore, college will be the first place most students of mixed heritage will find an academic affirmation of their identity. At this critical moment in our society, an education system that fails to provide a deep level of ethnic studies will fail our students, and they feel this, but too often they turn this upon themselves and think it is they who have failed. What we must do is not fail this generation or the next generations of our population, and I speak directly to Rob Bonta, who I know is also of mixed heritage, and thank him for overseeing this, and thank you for listening to us today.
Okay, thank you. Thank you much. Welcome.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Joy Callejo, a current third-year undergraduate here at UC Davis. So on behalf of Philippine X and Business and Law, while our organization acknowledges that all of the platforms and statements here are very, very important, our organization, would like to bring into light the idea of a sanctuary for our Daca students, especially with the current rescinding that Trump has done. I say this because there has been a reported estimate of 900 students across the US UC campuses, and a percentage of that is from our own. However, this statistic doesn't even include the students who prefer to remain from disclosing that information to the public. While administrators constantly bring up its core values, there has been one the campus does not do enough or even at all, and that is advocating. Advocating for our students who create this campus anything but inclusive, and empowering to the other students here at UC Davis. As a collective, come forth and bring this allyship to the students who come from backgrounds of resilience that needs to be valued. A lot can be said, but not doing enough says a lot more. With that being said, I'd like to take this conversation and continue it outside of this room. Philippine X and Business and Law statement does not end here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Welcome.
Good afternoon. My name is Miyuki Manzanito. I'm an undergraduate here at UC Davis. I actually was able to get to miss class because my Chicano Studies professor allowed me to take part in this important conversation, which I think also sort of speaks to the importance of ethnic studies, sort of the different disciplines within ethnic studies. There is an understanding between each one that there needs to be more conversations had to sort of further them. Now, as a transfer student from West Valley College, which isn't that far from De Anza College, I realized that I didn't take any ethnic studies classes because they never really they were not requirements to transfer to a UC or a CSU, and it wasn't until I came here as an international relations major that I realized that I had the time, and my major required me to take these courses, and I take them for fun now because it's important to learn more about our cultures. And now, also as I am also the statewide president of Student California Teachers Association, and we really briefly want to make a statement that we believe that if more conversations around Asian American students' concerns and cultural developments are had across classrooms, more Asian American students will want to one day return to the classroom as educators. And I believe that Professor Yu's statement about those who took Asian American studies or majored in Asian American studies entering the teaching profession is both very promising and also exciting at the same time. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome, Eddie.
Thank you very much. My name is Dean Murakami, and I'm president of the Los Reyes College Federation of Teachers, where I teach psychology at American River College here in over in Sacramento. I'm also vice president of the Faculty Association of California Community Colleges. So I'm speaking on behalf of community colleges in particular. You know, there's no denying that the statistics demonstrate that the API community is very successful in community colleges as well. However, I have to say, as many have pointed out, that the success is not consistent across the diverse groups represented by API. And while we attempt to increase success rates with programs such as adding counseling, mentoring, guided pathways, equity funding, and many others, which are very important, we fail to invest in many of the critical factors affecting so many students in their success. And we as faculty see this every day. These are factors such as poverty, homelessness, food insecurity, joblessness, physical and mental abuse, school to prison pipeline, drug and alcohol abuse, and mental health. While so many students that are affected by these social, cultural, and psychological factors, they are just so overwhelming barriers to their success as students. And the stereotypical, almost mythical success story of the API community in higher education obscures these factors, which are shared by so many other students, particularly those of color. The last thing I'd like to say is that, it seems that in the API community, student success in community colleges is too often defined by degree completion and transfer to a university. And as a result, an inordinate amount of time, effort, and money has been funded on those purposes. Now, while those might be laudable goals, only 33% of the API students in community colleges will actually graduate with a degree. Well, what about the other 67%? They have aspirations, they have goals, they want to have a better life as well. And their aspirations and goals should be no less worthy, no less laudable than the person who wants to graduate with a degree. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Senators Pan, Newman, and Assemblymember Blunta. My name is Norby Kumagai. When my family moved to Davis in 1969, my dad, Lindy Kumagai, started as part of the original faculty at the medical school here. We came from the University of Utah with the understanding, my dad did, from the dean, John Tupper, that he could create what was known at the time as a special admissions program for the new School of Medicine. When Alan Blockey sued the UC Board of Regents, that was the program that my dad had developed. The 2 times Blockey applied and was denied admission to the University of California, my dad also chaired the admissions committee, so we have a long history. Just briefly, I spent time during the 80s working for Speaker Willie Lewis Brown's Office of Majority Services, reporting to Richie Ross. And my mentors at the time for many years who got me involved in all this were Floyd Morey, who was in the assembly at the time. I also met Bob Matsui and Norman Mineta, were close personal friends as well as my mentors for many, many years. I appreciate the time. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thanks very much. Welcome.
My name is Kay Fisher. I teach ethnic studies at Chabot Community College in Hayward. I wanted to quickly say, although I understand the importance and the discussion around building career pathways and so forth, I am bothered by the questioning and the language around marketing Asian American studies and creating these job pathways as if that's the only purpose. And I wanted to remind everybody here and these senators and assemblymen that actually ethnic studies was founded on principles of social change and resisting larger structures of inequality, including capitalism. So I wanted to share a little bit about Chabot College. I started working there last year. Chabot serves over 14,000 students, most of whom are part-time students because they're working full-time supporting their families. We have a large population of first-generation college students, including 74% of all Asian students on our campus are first-generation and 51% of our Filipino students are. A quarter of our population is Asian and Filipino and Pacific Islander. However, the only Asian American Studies class that is being currently taught at Chabot is the Asian American Literature class. I'm going to be teaching the Intro to Asian American Studies class next semester, which hasn't been taught in 7 years. And I'm currently developing Asian American History classes. But see, it's all falling on me and maybe a handful of others who are invested in this. As for language courses, we definitely have a limitation on that. And we're depending on limited faculty, but also students to create representation, including for Pacific Islander students. There's currently a sort of Nesian Pacific Islander club being developed, but by students only. This virtual lack of Asian American Studies courses at Chabot, despite our large percentage, leads to various issues and challenges. A major issue is resources being stretched. We are not an Anapeasy school. We are an HSI school, and due to that, we have to depend on equity funding, which is already really stretched. Our students suffer from model minority stereotyping that they actually both internalize and is being repeated or internalized by their faculty members and classmates. And another major issue is we're fighting to have our school be a sanctuary school. Our students right now organized a march, a walkout and a march, and they're going to be planning to go to the district meeting to make our school a sanctuary district. And we serve close to 500 undocumented DACA students, many of whom are AAPI, but again, are, because of this lack of knowledge, are excluded from this discussion. I just wanted to lastly state that I both support the growth of Asian American studies, but also an increase of education and declarations of support for undocumented and DACA students. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, thanks. Okay, welcome.
Hi.
Hi.
Okay, so my name is Linda Wang, and I'm from Lincoln Heights, California, SoCal, and I'm a third-year transfer student.
My name is Rebecca Fong. I'm from Fremont, California, and I'm a senior.
My name is Tiffany Mack. I'm from San Francisco, California, and I'm a psych major.
We are students at UC Davis, and we are speaking on behalf of Disability Right Advocacy Committee in UC Davis. It is a student government, and we were working towards equity in higher education for students with disability. In the culture that we come from, mental illness is not seen as a party or understood in context. When students go to university, we hope that they would be able to understand if they have a mental illness or disability, including learning disabilities. My question for you all today is, how do we gather resources to help students?
We encourage legislators to, 1, heighten support and funding for all UC Davis students with disabilities, especially those from the API background. 2, support low-income students with disabilities in acquiring full evaluation and accommodation. 3, improve infrastructure, encourage a positive college climate, and establish a student-run advocacy center for students with disabilities.
4, work towards dispelling the stigma around disabilities and mental illness in the Asian American Pacific Islander community. And 5, establish classes and encourage research on disabilities in general, and discussing how disability affects Asian Americans in particular. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Mario Guerrero, Legislative Director for California Faculty Association. First, I want to thank you so much for this hearing today, and I also want to give a shout out to all the amazing activists out here. There was a question that Senator Pan asked about, do we have the political will? We definitely have the public will, and we need to transfer that public will to the political side, because the legislature can certainly take further, bolder action than it can. And to that extent, I look forward to working with you, Dr. Pan, with Senator Newman, and with Assemblymember Bonta very specifically on a couple of proposals that I think will have an impact not only on ethnic studies, but beyond. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, and I appreciate the leadership of the Faculty Association holding CSU accountable. Thank you. Welcome.
I'm glad that you are having this meeting. I heard about this only last night or the day before. I was
Actually, can you introduce yourself, sir,
my
please?
name is Freddie Gashihara.
Okay.
I was in San Mateo, College of San Mateo, when the ethnic study thing came about. And I helped in the Asian ethnic study syllabus for College of San Mateo in the 60s. I'm an internee of World War II. I was in 3 different camps during World War II. One of the things I wanted to be taught was the internment that I don't think is being taught as much. And it's very important now with the situation, especially for the Muslim community. I even recently found out just last week that during World War I, Germans was interned in camps here in the United States. They were also interned during World War II, same with the Italians. The most unusual part of it is one of the last internment center that I was in Arizona was on an Indian reservation. Both the internment centers in Arizona was on Indian reservation. One was in the Gila Indian Reservation, one was in the Colorado Indian Reservation. What I'm speaking of here is that Chinese Americans may have trouble because of this economic thing with China that we're having. There's also right now, people ask me when I speak out about the internment, it won't happen again, Fred, because there's no law. Well, there is a law now. The NDAA Act, the National Defense Authorization Act of 2011, Section 1021, can put any citizen, if they're considered an enemy combatant, I think a domestic terrorist or something like that, there's a section that says belligerent. Chris Hedges fought that all the way through with the help of some of the, I think the ACLU or some, all the way went up to whatever the court below the Supreme Court. Judge Catherine Forrest said that he was right, was going to put it up to the Supreme Court, and they denied it. So I would like the Asian American study to to teach more about the internment. I've heard that during the redress, there was supposed to be money set aside for teaching the internment, and that money was not being used correctly, or not used.
All right. Well, thank you, sir. Thank you for your testimony. I would mention that actually just this year, talking about education, about the incarceration of Japanese Americans during World War II, there was a bill authored by some member Marisucci on this very topic about getting more education about what happened with the incarceration of Japanese Americans. So there's what
people don't know that the Italians during World War II and the Germans was interned during World War II. That's not known at all. I tell many people that. Then recently I found out that in World War I, the Germans went interned too.
Well, thank you, sir. Thanks very much. Thanks. Welcome.
Hi, my name is Winnie, and I'm currently a fourth-year student studying Asian American Studies on campus here at UC Davis. So not only that, but I'm also the student academic community counselor. So my job is to listen to students who are interested in Asian American Studies, but I'm here to talk about the limitations that students face when they're picking a major, including Asian American Studies. So 40% of our UC Davis campus population consists of Asian Americans, but only 40 of us are, I don't know, sorry, I'm kind of nervous. But only 40 of us are actually Asian American Studies majors and minors. And given that percentage, that makes up less than 1%. Sorry. So top majors on campus include NPB and also animal science, and 60% of the 180 unit requirement goes to their major, and the other 40 or 30% goes to general education, which does not include ethnic studies. So I'm not here to discourage, or Asian American Studies is not to discourage other students from taking STEM fields or being in the STEM field itself, but we need everyone in this movement. That that includes people in STEM fields and tech fields that have the ASA and ethnic studies knowledge. And I know that you're here to support us, but we also need all your colleagues to also be here and also have that knowledge of ethnic studies.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thanks very much.
Hello, my name is Yi from Rise Up Yolo County. I stand before you today to advocate for both Hmong American history courses and the hiring of Hmong professors in our California higher education system. California has one of the largest Hmong student populations, yet our histories are not taught. And that should be alarming to you. Furthermore, across all 9 UC campuses, there is only one Hmong tenure track professor. And in my eyes, the UC system has failed in its lack of Hmong history courses and the hiring of Hmong professors who can teach these courses. So I strongly urge you to take this into consideration when thinking about the quality of our California higher ed system. And where can you start? Start with linking up with the Asian American Studies Department at UC Davis. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right. Well, I want to thank everyone who came to give public comment. Really appreciate it. Before we wrap up, actually, Senator Bonta, would you like to say a few words first?
Sure. I want to thank Chair Dr. Pan and Senator Newman for being here. My apologies for getting here later than I thought. I was at a Housing Affordability Committee hearing where we were talking about the crisis in housing affordability throughout the state of California, and after that, a Filipino American History Month celebration in Sacramento. So, but I came in time to hear much of the public comment, and I really appreciate the comments, not just about Asian American studies, but a lot of comments about the intersectionality with so many other issues that are important to us that deal with opportunity and equity and justice and inclusion for all of our communities. So I'm thankful for all those connections that were drawn out and the intersections that were articulated. You know, for me, I just want to share a quick story about my experience with Asian American studies, particularly Asian American history. Some of you may know I was born in the Philippines. My mom's an immigrant from the Philippines. I came here when I was 2 months old, and in my early childhood years, I lived in the headquarters of the United Farm Workers of America movement. I lived in La Paz, which is outside of Bakersfield in the Tehachapi Mountains. And my father and mother worked directly with Cesar Chavez, and Dolores Huerta was there, Philip Vera Cruz, Pete Velasco, many of the great leaders we've all heard about and know about and read about. And as I went through high school and on to college, I declared as a history major. And I looked for the story that I knew to be true in the history books, and it wasn't there. I looked for Larry at Leong, and he wasn't there. I looked for Philip Vera Cruz, and I couldn't find him. I looked for the Agricultural Workers Organizing Committee, and that part of the narrative wasn't there. I looked for the Delano Grape Strike of 1965, and I couldn't find it. And I thought to myself, as anybody would, something's wrong here. There's something missing. There are amazing leaders who've led and events that have transpired, and they're not in our history books. And that led me in my pursuit of the history major to give voice to silences in history and tell stories that occurred but weren't being told. And to me, it was a very empowering experience. I know to many of our community members, when there's nothing in the history books about the great contributions we've made to this nation and this state, or what exists is negative. It's disempowering, and it's not true, and it's wrong, and we need to change that. And so, fast forward to my election in 2012 in the state legislature, deeply honored to be the first Filipino American state legislator in the history of California, and also, thank you. My mom is very excited about that fact, but also feeling a very deep sense of responsibility to tell our story. So, introduced AB 123. To make sure that the contributions of Filipino Americans to the California farm labor movement be told. And also later, the next year, AB 7, Larry at Leong Day, creating that day in California so our students will learn and be inspired by these stories of history. And that's just one story. That's my story. That's my personal story about what history and Asian American studies meant to me. But the story's different. And all too common. It's happened many times over, and there's so many other stories that need to be told and be included and be lifted up and promoted and shared with not just the community for the person who is from that community, but for all communities, because our diversity is our beautiful strength. And so I thank you for being here. I thank you for your activism. I'm honored to be here with you to listen and learn and team up and partner as we take action steps to strengthen our Asian American studies and higher education, and work together on so many issues that impact our community. So thank you for being here.
Okay, thank you. Well, first of all, I want to thank actually everyone who attended this hearing, and really appreciate your engagement. I want to thank all our presenters. In some ways, this is, as they said, I will say that this is just the start of the conversation. I think this hearing could have gone for a very long time, and so we have a conversation that we just began here. I really do want to thank all the presenters. I want to thank my good friend and colleagues here, Senator Newman and Senator Bonta, and thank you so much for your leadership of our API Legislative Caucus. I want to also thank, actually we have the staff of our API Legislative Caucus here. I think, Kat, where are you? There you are. And Jenny, I think I saw a little earlier as well.
There you go. All right, Jenny. I also want to thank my own staff. So Alyssa Ishida worked very hard to pull this all together. I want to thank UC Davis for hosting. And of course, I mentioned Professor Rodriguez, thank you so much for helping to put this together as well. And certainly, I also want to thank our Senate staff who had to do all the manage all the AV, and our Senate sergeants as well. So they helped make this possible here, and I'm really thrilled that we're able to do this here at UC Davis as well. So with that, again, thank you so much for being here, and we will now adjourn this hearing of the Select Committee on API Affairs on the status of Asian American Studies in California Public Higher Education. Thank you.